I always had dreams of being a big city cop. Growing up watching shows like Forensic Files and NYPD Blue inspired me. I dreamed of becoming a hero who fought crime to protect people, but I guess fate had other ideas. Rather than patrolling the streets of Brooklyn or Chicago, I somehow wound up in a small town in the rural Midwest. Nothing but dirt, tumbleweeds, and flat land as far as the eye could see. Some comedian once made a joke about his time living out here, saying that he could sit on his porch and watch his dog run away for 3 whole days. His name escapes me now, but that joke is surprisingly accurate. Because of everything that has happened recently, I won't be giving the name of this town. There's a lot I still don't understand about what happened, but I know my superiors wouldn't be happy if I went around blabbing about and spreading rumors. Posting this at all is probably a bad idea, but at this point, I don't know what else to do. After landing the job out here, it quickly became apparent that there wasn't much action and that was the norm, but that all changed about a week ago. A fellow officer, I'll call Doug, and I were on our usual patrol route. This normally consisted of us cruising around town and the rural surrounding roads, and occasionally breaking up a high school party. Not exactly the hotbed of criminal activity that I had sort of hoped for. Doug is a senior officer and been working for the same precinct out here for nearly 30 years. He's a laid-back type, cordial, and doesn't seem in much of a hurry to do anything, except in the rare occasion of something happening. The sun was beginning to set in the distance, and Doug was retelling the incident of him facing off with a hungry cougar while trying to help an injured camper. That was a normal evening for us, and I very much enjoyed listening to him recount tales from his pantheon of stories. Doug pulled the cruiser around a bend in what is essentially the most remote patch of our jurisdiction. It's a small valley with multiple foothills, but no one ever really goes out there. As soon as we rounded the corner, though, we saw something that we didn't expect. There was a Jeep parked on the shoulder right in front of a hill with the driver's side door propped open. Our headlights beamed over the vehicle, but I saw nobody inside. "And the hell is this?" Doug asked, pulling our car over on the adjacent shoulder. The two of us stepped out and approached the desolate vehicle. The lights were off, but it appeared it had only been there a short time. It was weird that whoever drove it there hadn't even bothered to shut the door, though. And Doug and I approached, with him taking the lead and approaching the derelict vehicle. He called out to the missing driver but got no response. He kept his hand on his holster and crept closer as I watched his back. There was no indication that anyone was out there aside from the Jeep, but I felt the hairs on the back of my neck bristle. Something wasn't right. I truly hoped we weren't about to stumble upon somebody's suicide, but that was the vibe that I initially got. Doug reached the side of the Jeep and briefly peered inside. As soon as he saw what was in there, he recoiled back, drawing his revolver and motioning for me to move away. He ordered me to call in backup, looking more frantic than I had ever seen him. "Tell them to send everyone," Doug ordered, his gaze glancing around the vicinity with a sudden frenzy. I did as he requested, and I radioed dispatch, still not understanding what exactly it was that he saw. The dispatch operator confirmed the request, telling me that 2 other units and an ambulance were on the way. "Freeze!" Doug suddenly shouted. I looked up to see him shining his flashlight out in front of the Jeep. There was a man there dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans. He was holding something in his hand, but from my vantage point, I couldn't tell what it was. Johnny, is that you?" Doug asked, seeming to recognize him. The man then lifted his head and I recognized him. A local teenager, a native guy with a bit of a checkered history. We've caught him for underage drinking and smoking pot on a few occasions, but never anything severe. Johnny's eyes were vacant, almost sorrowful. He stared back at Doug and he swallowed hard. "I have to do it," Johnny replied. Doug shook his head, almost silently begging him not to try anything radical. "Johnny, just put it down. We can talk, figure this out." Johnny paused a moment and then shook his head. He inspected the item in his hand and I realized it was a walkie-talkie. I didn't understand what was happening, but I kept my pistol locked on him. "There's no time. I'm sorry." Johnny lifted his arm. Bang. The ambulance arrived on scene a few minutes later, picking up Johnny and rushing him to the town's only hospital. Doug had shot him in the left shoulder, causing him to drop his item. He was thankfully alive and stable, but unfortunately, Doug doesn't carry the standard 9mm, instead patrolling around with his revolver 44 Magnum. That one bullet did some rather severe damage, and I still didn't understand why any of it was necessary. Doug ordered all of us away from the scene, refusing to allow anyone near the Jeep or even telling us what he found inside. Several hours later, a special unit from a larger neighboring precinct had arrived. Things finally started coming together after that. Johnny's Jeep was loaded with nearly 30 pounds of pyrotechnic flash powder, the stuff used in fireworks. He had crammed it into nearly 24 small cylinders and wrapped them tightly with 2 propane tanks into walkie-talkie. It was a bomb, and a rather large one which he had rigged to the other walkie-talkie to allow for remote detonation. Johnny's father owns a fireworks chain, and after scouting his warehouse, we found that's where Johnny had acquired his supplies. Johnny was a rebellious teenager, but I never thought he would do something like this. The bomb squad managed to successfully dismantle his device without incident, but the whole scenario still didn't make much sense. Johnny was unconscious for days afterwards, and the .44 round that had hit him turned out to have caused more damage than initially thought. Doctors said that he would survive, but would face extensive recovery. Doug took the incident harder than any of us, but since our suspect was unconscious, the only thing we could do to learn more was to return to the scene of the crime. The Jeep had been removed by then, so myself, Doug, and 2 other officers had traced his route on foot. There was a small valley which led into a few rocky foothills, but no indication of a possible target. No one lives in that area, nor anywhere close really. That was partially revealing, as we were afraid Johnny was intending to hurt a lot of people, but that didn't seem to be the case. After only a few minutes of following the small ravine, we found something. A narrow opening was carved into the side of one of the hills, looking as though it was an old mining tunnel entrance. Upon closer inspection, I realized that it wasn't just caved in. It actually appeared as though a large stone slab had sealed the entrance. It was one solid piece and not just rubble. I found that quite curious, but I didn't exactly know what to make of it. The town had dozens of old mines from the early gold rush days, but they've all been shut down for decades now. Furthermore, we haven't been able to find any evidence of a mine ever existing in that particular spot. I got this odd feeling as we had approached it, like a heavy static electricity in the air. The hairs on my arms and head seemed to stand up, and I noticed it on the others as well. Normally, this can be a very worrying sign and can sometimes indicate that lightning is about to strike. The sky was clear though, and that didn't seem likely. Something about it was oddly unnerving in a way I don't know how to fully articulate. We lingered there for a few minutes, but didn't find much of interest there or anywhere else. We left shortly after, and took the short trail back to our vehicles. I don't know whether it was just my nerves mounting, but I felt incredibly nervous on my way back. It felt like we were being watched. Johnny thankfully woke up 2 days later, and Doug and I returned to the hospital to question him. He was still quite out of it, likely a reaction to his medication and condition. His father was there, and at first he denied us permission to interview his son, until Johnny himself insisted upon speaking to us. Both his father and us were quite taken aback by that request, but we were all too happy to oblige. "Where's my Jeep?" Johnny asked as Doug and I had entered the room. Impound, bomb squad dismantled it. Doug replied matter-of-factly. He sat in a chair opposing Johnny, who appeared quite distressed by the admission. We have to go back out there, there's not much time. Johnny then tried moving upward but cringed as pain shot through his shoulder. He gritted his teeth and reluctantly sat back down, breaths falling frantic from his lips. You're not going anywhere, Johnny, not until you tell us what you were doing. You could be in a lot of trouble here. I mean, what were you doing with all those explosives? The tunnel, he replied without a moment's hesitation, making no effort to downplay his intent. We have to destroy it. And Doug shot me a confused glance and I posed a question. That mine shaft, is that what you mean? Johnny shook his head. No, it's not a mine shaft. Johnny's eyes were almost frantic then, and his breathing almost turned to hyperventilations. You've been out there, right? You saw it, he asked. We found it, Johnny. It's already sealed. Johnny then vehemently shook his head. It won't stay that way. It opens every couple of days. Doug and I exchanged another perturbed glance. I'm sure he wanted to write off Johnny as some sort of eccentric, but there was an obvious desperate pleading in his voice that made me take pause. Oh please, Johnny begged, eyes starting to water. Why, Johnny? I asked, leaning in. What's in there? Doug seemed annoyed that I was even engaging his delusion, but Johnny was clearly petrified by something and I wanted to know what it was. I don't know, something horrible. I've seen people post about them online. We have to destroy it. We didn't get much more out of him than that. He just kept begging us to finish what he wasn't able to do. He also said something about how things will come out, which made my skin crawl. I didn't understand how a normal kid like Johnny had suddenly become so obsessed with detonating an old tunnel, but I couldn't deny the odd feeling that it gave me, and the pleading desperation in his voice. Doug and I laughed, realizing that he wasn't going to tell us much more than that. After a bit of math, I realized that if what Johnny had said was true, then the mine shaft was set to open the following morning around 3 a.m. Doug believed it was a load of hogwash, but I felt that the least I could do was investigate Johnny's claims. It didn't seem possible, I know, and Doug told me that I was being thrown for a loop, but I felt like there was something more to it. Johnny was a troubled kid, as I had mentioned, but he didn't seem like a liar. So myself and two other officers, Hastings and Gunnarsson, returned to the scene of the incident, and Doug elected to stay behind, convinced there was nothing of interest out there. It probably had something to do with the fact that we had to be out there by 3 a.m. as well, and Doug was not in any way a morning person. According to Johnny, 3 a.m. the following day was when the tunnel was set to open once again, whatever that meant. I thought that whatever this was, there would be a logical explanation to it. I met Hastings and Gunnarsson out there just before 3 a.m. the following morning. Both of them only seemed slightly awake and also slightly remorseful over their decision to meet me. A thick fog lingered over the foothills, sprinkling a chilly dew over the environment. I tucked my coat up around my neck, trying to ignore the chills rolling down my spine. The three of us sat around sipping coffee for about half an hour until 3 a.m. had rolled around. Suddenly an odd, abrasive noise permeated the dark atmosphere. It sounded like heavy rock scraping against rock, a loud, oppressive grinding that made me clench my teeth. It sounded like it was coming from the ravine up ahead, and it made the cold air dip a few more degrees. Hastings and Gunnarsson clearly seemed unnerved by it as well. Gunnarsson wondered aloud whether it was a rock slide, but I wasn't so sure the explanation was that simple. The three of us crept our way around the gully. It seemed like the fog was getting thicker the further we went. It got so bad that visibility was soon limited to maybe 20 yards. Something's not right. Hastings spoke what I was also feeling. There was an odd quality to the fog, like some ill-defined heaviness that lingered within it. It didn't feel natural. Despite the red flags, I foolishly insisted that we continue onward. We were only about 50 yards from the tunnel entrance, and I needed to see it again. Something incredibly strange happened then. What I can only describe as a sudden head rush then struck me, like my brain had been jump-started into overdrive. My vision began to alter in a way that I don't even fully know how to explain. It was like my perception just suddenly shifted. Little tracers trailed off the rocks around me, and the ground appeared like it was breathing in and out. Now, I'm pretty vanilla when it comes to drug usage, and although I've never taken them personally, it almost felt like what I was experiencing was similar to accounts of mushrooms and LSD trips that I've read online. Out of nowhere, Hastings suddenly began to giggle. Both Gunnarsson and I looked back to him in confusion. His eyes were darting around like flies, and he had this little manic smile on his face. "The hell is so funny?" Gunnarsson's eyes were wide as saucers when he had asked it, and I could tell that he was feeling it too. "I feel weird. What did you put in that coffee?" Hastings asked. Needless to say, I hadn't put anything in the coffee, especially not hallucinogenic drugs. There was something in the air itself that was messing with our minds. I then decided to go all out, and I made a mad dash towards the tunnel. The feeling got worse the closer I got. The world degraded to a foreign slurry in my eyes, and the rocky ground became as turbulent as an unruly sea. I could barely keep myself upright, and barely even decipher what was around me. Then, by some miracle, I saw it. The tunnel emerged from the dense fog, but this time the entrance was open. From behind me, I heard Hastings' giggles erupt into a bellow of laughter, like a mad scientist bringing Frankenstein back to life. Gunnarsson then screamed, and I just booked it. I took one last glance at the tunnel as I fled, and I swear there was something in there looking back at me. Something that I don't even know how to begin describing. Something that just shouldn't exist. I ran like never before in my life, suddenly consumed by the fear that I felt. Both Gunnarsson and Hastings were no longer where I had last seen them. From further within the canopy of fog, I heard Hastings continue to cackle like a madman, but I never caught sight of him. The crippling mental haze seemed to alleviate the further that I got from the tunnel, and by the time that I reached the vehicles, I felt completely coherent once more. Gunnarsson was standing there panting with quivering hands. "Where's Hastings?" I asked as I joined him. Gunnarsson looked back to me in terror. "He followed after you." From behind us, I saw the fog slowly drifting outwards, as if it were some singular entity drifting in the wind. I no longer heard Hastings' laughter, and I knew that if we didn't leave then we wouldn't at all. Gunnarsson and I fled, leaving Hastings behind. I called Doug on the way, trying to convey everything that had just happened. I don't know how much he understood from my frantic rant mixed with this sudden awakening, but he seemed to understand that Hastings was in trouble. He and I rendezvoused at the station about 20 minutes later, and I reiterated the account above. Doug didn't seem to know what to make of my story, but he did understand that Hastings was missing. He rallied everybody in the police force to go back and search, albeit Gunnarsson, who vehemently refused to go back. He and Doug got into a heated argument about it, and Gunnarsson tossed his badge into the dirt, claiming that no job was worth going back there, before storming off. I'll admit that I was absolutely terrified of going back, but I knew that we had to help Hastings. It was my fault that he was out there to begin with, and I had to do my part. It turns out that it may have been too late, as by the time that Doug and I returned with reinforcements, we found no trace of him. The fog was gone by that point too, and the tunnel sealed back up, just as it was the first time that we had found it. Doug began to amass a search team and ordered me to go home and get some rest and decompress from the situation. My girlfriend Samantha could see that something had happened, but I didn't tell her about it. I think the adrenaline had finally worn off, and I felt a severe drowsiness setting in. Last thing I remember was slumping on the couch of our apartment, only to be awakened several hours later by Samantha shaking me vigorously. "Mark, something's happening. Wake up. I feel really weird." As my eyes sprung open, I saw the room distort around me similar to how it had previously. That unnerving mental haze was back, and that could only mean one thing. She and I got our dog Max as our perceptions continued to disintegrate, and we fled. Max was going ballistic all the way out to the car, switching from snarling like he had gone rabid to whining pitifully. It was dark again, and from all around us, I could hear laughter and cries from the other residents in our complex. I wanted to help them, but in the moment, I only cared about getting Samantha and Max to safety. By the time we reached Samantha's car, there were screams echoing out from within the complex. Other residents were fleeing as well, but many were still inside. By the time we hit the main street, the town's tornado siren had begun blaring in the distance. Samantha asked me what the hell was going on, but I didn't even know how to respond. I dialed Doug, and he instructed me to meet him at the station with a trembling urgency in his voice. We got there only a few minutes later, and I told Samantha to take the car and Max and get to safety. She had tears in her eyes and asked me what was going on, but I didn't have time to tell her then. I just told her that I loved her and that I would call her as soon as I could. She agreed, and I watched her drive off as I returned to the moment at hand. Doug rallied every officer at our precinct, which was only 9 of us because the town is so small, and sent them back to the apartments. Only Hastings was missing, but the rest arrived shortly after we did. Doug had said that dispatch had been flooded with 911 calls from multiple residents of the complex. I felt the horrific guilt of the situation sink deep into my skull, causing my mind to throb. Everything in my mind and gut was screaming for me to get as far away from that place as possible, but I couldn't. I couldn't just abandon everyone who lived there. After all, whatever was happening there, it was happening because of me. That thing had come back for me. Several people were in the parking lot as we arrived. They appeared delirious and confused, with most of them in their pajamas as if they had had to leave very quickly. Doug ordered all of them away from the building as we began to conduct interviews and ask if anybody was injured. I spoke with an elderly lady, Martha, who had lived in the unit below Samantha and mine ever since we had moved in. She was all but petrified and clutched her Palmarian tightly in her hands. Her nose was bleeding, but thankfully she didn't appear too badly injured. I spoke with her as she held a rag to her nose, tears falling faster from her eyes with every word. She told me she had suddenly been awakened by a strange feeling. She felt woozy, and since she's diabetic, she thought perhaps her insulin levels were low. But then she saw her husband sitting in their bedroom closet and giggling. She stumbled towards him, calling out and expressing her fears that she may be having a medical emergency. Without warning, she said that her husband, Frank, suddenly lashed out and slapped her across the face. He then returned to the closet, holding his knees and giggling. Martha fled after that, and that decision probably saved her life. She began sobbing, saying that Frank had never done anything like that, and she was worried that he might be sick. I've conversed with Frank myself dozens of times, and he never would have struck me as the type of guy to do that. She told me that he was still inside and begged me to go and check on him. Doug got on a speaker and instructed everyone to leave the complex immediately. We were worried that the building may have sprung a gas leak, which could have possibly explained Martha and the other residents' symptoms, but it was clearly far beyond that. Not a single person came outside. There's only maybe 50 residents in our entire complex, and most of them were already outside, although we estimated that at least a dozen were still within. 2 of our officers approached one of the entrances as the remainder of us covered them. I watched their steps grow more hobbled and awkward the closer they got, until one of them actually fell over entirely, propping himself up with his arm. He then heaved and vomited on the concrete, and turned back as the other officer tried pulling him back to his feet. The 2 of them managed to get back to the rest of us, brandishing looks of terror reminiscent of the other residents. No one went near the building after that, and no one else came out. It was just a stalemate that went on long into the night. Doug kept on the intercom, periodically instructing people to evacuate, but no one ever did. The other residents were ferried away from the scene, with many of them being forced to abandon their loved ones still inside. Every now and then we would hear laughter, screaming, or other less definable sounds reverberate from inside the building. We got glimpses of silhouettes within, but never anything entirely clear. No one really understood what was going on, but after the first officer's experiences and the other residents' testimonies, no one wanted to risk going in there. The sun finally rose the following day, and the real bizarre situation took on an entirely new perspective. It had been hours since anything was heard from within the building, but something became clear as the smoldering sun beamed down upon it. The building itself was different. Some spots looked almost melted, while others seemed to have elongated and grown taller or wider. It's like the building itself was suffering from the odd haze that had afflicted myself and the other residents. Not long after the sun had risen, an entourage of black Suburbans suddenly rolled up to the scene, followed soon after by a SWAT truck. Like some cliché entourage, a group of men in black suits exited the trucks and approached Doug. They spent a minute or two conversing before Doug looked back to the rest of us. Much to my surprise and relief, we were then told that we could leave and that the men in black would handle the situation. By that point, I had been up for nearly 24 hours and I wanted nothing more than to just sleep. I probably should have asked a few more questions before leaving, but I was barely awake enough to even remain standing by that point. I assumed those guys were CIA or from some other secret government agency, but I haven't been able to confirm that. That was about a week ago now, and as of writing this, that's about where we stand. I haven't been able to return back to my apartment since, and I have since been told by Doug that I likely never will. They're considering that entire property and the 11 individuals still inside to be already lost. And Doug hasn't told me much more than that, and I don't even know if they've told him the full extent of what's happening. Clearly, whatever is in that building is significantly above our jurisdiction. The ravine with the tunnel is also now under the supervision of the unnamed government agents. I never would have imagined myself at the epicenter of something like this. I guess in some cruel twist of irony, I finally got the large-scale case that I always wanted, but I never could have envisioned it being like this. Whatever it was that was in that tunnel and is now in that building, it's way beyond us. I want to think there's some logical explanation to this, like some gas leak in the mine caused me to hallucinate and then somehow spread to our apartment complex. I'd be a fool to believe that after everything that's happened though. Whatever happened to me and the others, it wasn't in any way natural. It was like that thing invaded my mind in proximity to its strength and the strange psychic aura that it possesses. Whatever power it has even seemed to distort the building itself. I never got a good look at it, but what kind of thing could warp your mind simply by being near it? Just as Johnny had said, I've managed to find a few stories online of people finding these tunnels. I don't know how much I read was fiction, but no one seems to have an explanation for them. People just apparently seem to stumble across them one day, oftentimes in places they hadn't been before. If anyone reading has a possible explanation for all of this, then please feel free to comment. I'm at a loss to explain this, and I'll admit, I've never been much of a believer in the whole supernatural stuff. Nothing I've found online seems to explain what that thing is, natural or otherwise. Hastings is still missing, and last I heard those people are still locked inside that building. Whatever the truth is, I just hope that no more of those tunnels are out there. God knows what kind of things may come out of them. Just to be clear, I know that rules are a given at a fast food place, well at any job. I mean, I see people from my generation complaining and crying about anything and everything that they can complain and cry about. I've had jobs at other fast food restaurants before, so I know what I'm talking about. There's a lot to hate in this capitalistic hellscape that we call America. But crying about a rule that says you shouldn't be on your phone while you're serving customers. Come on, Ian, don't be an idiot. Sorry I went off on a tangent there. My point is that when I think about the rules that I was given on the late night at my local fast food place, and then I think about all of my coworkers who complain during the day shift, the normal shift, I get really wound up. Those doofuses have no idea how lucky they are to abide by an earthly and grounded set of rules. And if I had a way out of this late night shift and into the mid-afternoon shift, I would take it. If I had a way out of this job at all, I would take it. But I'm trapped now. This is my life. We've just given away the position, I'm sad to say. The interviewer told me, and I rather dejectedly planned to get out of my seat and head back to the hostile job market when he added something. But there's another position. A nighttime shift between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. The pre-morning shift, we call it. Even though it is morning, it certainly won't feel like it. I'll tell you that much. The 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. window was like an entirely different time of day altogether. You and one other person would be working a sort of skeleton crew, so it would be grueling work, I won't lie to you. But if you were truly desperate for a job, then I'll take it, I said. When I got the job at this chain, it seemed like every other mid-sized junk food restaurant in America. It wasn't a massive brand, not McDonald's or Burger King. It certainly wasn't on the level of being a well-known corporation, but you may have heard of it. Yummy Burgers, it's called. It didn't have a restaurant in every city, but certainly one in every state. And that was 4 years ago, and this is now the only branch still open. I'm grateful for that, as terrifying and terrible as this job may be. Because if this place were to close down, I would meet the same ends as all those other poor souls working the night shift at the various other branches. I still remember when I was offered the role back in 2022. And coming out of the pandemic when I had been living off dwindling savings in a dying economy, I was ecstatic to have any job at all. Shoveling fries into bags might sound demoralizing to most people, but I'll tell you what really sounded demoralizing to me. And being 2 months away from being unable to afford rent and having to live on the streets. So I think my eagerness blinded me to some of the red flags. You see, this mid-sized restaurant chain, which many of you most likely wouldn't remember, that's the nature of the force that surrounds this place, wasn't quite like every other chain out there. There were strange rules involved. Stranger than normal, I should say, because I will admit that plenty of managers at plenty of fast food restaurants are slightly power hungry, and not in the way that Ian thinks. Sorry, I need to stop complaining about Ian. He just pisses me off when I think about him working the day shift, blissfully ignorant to the darkness that befalls this place at night. Or to be more specific, between the hours of 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning. Why couldn't I be the one working from midday to 8? Why couldn't I be the one complaining about not being able to text my little boo thing while serving customers at the register? Seriously, Ian's such a lucky little so-and-so for getting that position over me. Sorry, I'm getting distracted again. Truth be told, I'm just annoyed at myself. All I had to do when my soon-to-be manager offered me the nighttime position was say no. But that would never have happened. You didn't see the pay that he was offering by the hour. It was over 2 times as much as the advertised pay rate for the normal Yummy Burgers position. I was bowled over. Of course I took the job. I should have asked questions, but I was blinded by the dollar signs swimming about in my eyes. At the time, I was excited about my 3-hour shift because it paid just as well as an 8-hour shift. I just didn't know why it paid so well at the time. I would soon find out. Now, when you get to the 5th and final page, said my manager Frank as he handed me the contract, and just keep an open mind. I was confused as to what Frank meant, but it was only one of the many odd things that he would say over the coming weeks, months, and years as I finally started to learn just what Yummy Burgers was actually supposed to be. And it wasn't a fast food place, I'll tell you that much. The 5th page of the contract read as follows. You, the employee, agree to follow each of the following 15 stipulations to the letter, as detailed in this contract. 1. You will not talk to any of the customers in the drive-thru no matter what they say or do. 2. You will not, nor will your coworker, man the station alone for more than 5 minutes at a time. 3. You will under no circumstances step outside to take out the waste or deal with altercations between the hours of 5 and 6. 4. You will stay behind the cash register when serving customers within the Yummy Burgers building. 5. You will wait until the building is empty before clearing away any trays and other waste. If customers fill the property until your shift ends, then you will clear up the premises once your pre-morning shift ends. 6. You will serve delivery drivers the packages they require within 5 minutes and take not a second longer. 7. You will leave the door to the men's bathroom open with a wedge throughout your shift. 8. Either you or your coworker will be sure to keep an eye on the front of house at all times. 9. If the light to the main corridor goes out, then keep the door between the back of house and the corridor locked until the end of your shift, no matter what you see or hear. 10. If you hear your name emanating from the freezer at the back of house, then go and wait by the cash register and do not leave your station for at least 10 minutes. 11. If a drive-thru customer orders 2 burger meals with fries, then serve them 3 burger meals with fries. 12. If a customer chooses to eat in and request the table nearest to the cash register, then swap out their drink for a blue slushie. 13. If you see a blue BMW in the car park, call your manager. 14. If you see a crying girl in the front of house with her face in her hands, turn away before she looks to you. 15. If your coworker has a second pupil in either one of their eyes, call your manager. And bizarre, aren't they? Frank said. I nodded. Very. Well, some of them make sense. I read over the rules again. Keeping an eye on the front of house at all times, that makes sense. Not manning the station alone for more than 5 minutes at a time, that makes sense too. Serving delivery drivers their packages quickly. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. But the rest of the stipulations are jokes, right? This is a bit of light hazing on the new guy, I assume. Frank frowned. Look at me, Jerry. I'm a 55-year-old manager of a fast food restaurant. And do I look like the sort of guy who would haze a new recruit? I assure you that these rules are completely serious. And I also assure you that I was in your position 7 years ago. I was sitting right in that very seat, as a matter of fact, taking on the night shift, rolling my eyes, scoffing at everything the manager at the time was telling me. I didn't believe a word of it, but I did, and you will too. And if you're lucky, and I mean really darn lucky, then you'll find a way out of this one day like I did. Well, I mean, not a way out of it, but... Frank paused as if realizing he had said too much. The point is, I'm safe now. Safer in this role. I mean, and you'll... It was my turn to frown as my new manager trailed off, looking flustered as he realized that he had said too much, time and time again. What are you talking about, safer? What about this job isn't safe? Nothing, said Frank, but there was a caveat. As long as you follow the rules. I had a right mind to tear up the contract then and there, but I didn't. I signed it, and to this day, I have no idea why. I wasn't ignorant to the red flags, the warning signs that something was wrong with Frank, with that place, with that contract. with yummy burgers as an overall concept. And that was what frightened me the most of all. As if I were completely without free will, my hand took the pen and the pen took to the contract, signing the final line on the final page with my name. I looked towards Frank in horror and he nodded, as if to say, "It was the same for me, kid. I'm sorry. There's no way out of this now." My first shift was the following day, and I arrived at 3 a.m. to take over from the infamous Ian himself, who made sure to tell me that he always hated the first Saturday of the month, the one day that he had to work the late night shift, or the pre-morning shift as he would later jokingly call it. I scoffed and sarcastically said, "Oh yeah, must be rough having to work so late." "Hey, you get it," replied the oblivious oaf. "All right, my guy, later." I went into the building, which was devoid of customers, and I prayed quite innocently that it would remain that way for the rest of the early pre-morning shift. Behind the register was a young woman who looked to be a similar age to me, somewhere in her early 20s. She was pretty and had a friendly face, the kind that made me instantly forget all of the ominous signs leading up until that moment, and decide that, hey, maybe working at Yummy Burgers wouldn't be so terrifying after all. Screw Frank and his strangely threatening speech about a risk to my safety. Of course, once the butterflies had faded and I started thinking rationally about my situation once again, I'd realized that there was no good explanation for my new manager offering such intimidating words to his new employee. In what world does a manager make it apparent to an employee, before he even signs the contract, that this will be a terrible, terrifying, and treacherous job? "Hey," said the girl behind the register, "you work in this shift with me?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm Jerry." "Cynthia. Nice to meet you. This your first shift too?" "A third," she said. "And there was another guy, Mark, but he left." I raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Left? Oh, but Frank gave me the terrifying speech about how nobody leaves this place. Didn't he do the same for you?" She smiled. "Oh sure, I think he's just got a few screws loose though. Mark told me a couple of days ago that he had reached the end of his tether and he was quitting, and so he quit. And that was that. He did his final shift last night and now you're taking over. And nothing insidious about that, is there? I haven't seen anything insidious at all, for that matter. Haven't seen anything weird or unsafe yet. Frank sure does like talking about how unsafe this place can be. No wonder there's such a high turnover of employees if he likes to drive away candidates before they've even signed the contract. The contract was weird though, I admitted. Sure, a bunch of nonsensical rules, but I wasn't gonna turn down that pay. We only gotta do 3 hours a night, well, morning, and we get the same we'd earn for an 8-hour shift. It's a no-brainer really, isn't it? I nodded. That was certainly the way that I viewed it. But as I heard Cynthia say it aloud, I wasn't so sure. Maybe hearing the words from an outside perspective made them ring with a slightly different timbre in my ears. Not sure. All I know is that a pretty face wasn't enough to entirely settle my unnerved gut. I couldn't stop thinking about the way that I had signed that document, the way my hand had acted without my say-so. I told myself that I was just tired, that I just felt as if I hadn't moved my hand willingly because, I don't know, I had disassociated. After all, I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. My entire life had been on autopilot because I was worried about losing my apartment and being out on my butt. Yummy Burgers was a saving grace, and that was what I told myself as I got to work, serving burgers and fries to customers. And when Cynthia and I reached the end of that shift without incident, I felt a massive weight off my shoulders. "Hey, you see," she said as we headed to our cars, "I told you, this is a sweet gig and there's nothing to worry about. Frank himself is probably the only thing that we need to worry about. The guy's mentally unwell. I nodded, taking that explanation to heart and decided that it solved everything, but it didn't, of course, as Frank wasn't the one to pen the contract. Frank was just a store manager. Somebody had written down those strange rules. Somebody and something seemed very wrong about that place, and I was certain that Cynthia secretly felt the same, but was merely pretending otherwise. Pretending to be perfectly happy because nothing outwardly bad had happened so far. But surely she had to feel it. As I said, a weight lifted off my shoulders when we left the building. Come my next shift on Sunday, it didn't sail by as smoothly as the first, and I could see by Cynthia's face that this was the first weirdness that she had witnessed too. "I'll have your face in the bag, please," said the drive-thru customer. I took a glance over Cynthia's shoulder and got a good look at the driver. She was a short and rotund woman with a pleasant enough face, but it was not one that gave me butterflies, as Cynthia's face did. It certainly churned my stomach somewhat, but in a way that told me something was deeply, deeply wrong with the woman sitting in the car, looking up at me through the drive-thru window. Cynthia and I had been doing a sterling job of following the rules to the letter, as stipulated in our contracts. Rule number 1, you will not talk to any of the customers in the drive-thru no matter what they say or do. That had been easy enough during my first shift. The customers would state their orders through the intercom. Cynthia or I would bag up the food and we would silently hand it over. There would be a thank you and it would be awkward not to respond, but just awkward, not unsettling. This was the first unsettling incident. Cynthia was the one at the window handling the woman's order, and I could see that she was about to respond almost involuntarily, I think. "Cynthia," I called out, stopping her. She turned to face me and I shook my head. "I said I'll have your face in the bag, please," repeated the customer at the window. "Didn't you hear me? It's rude not to answer someone when they say something, especially a customer telling you exactly what she wants. And I want your damn face in the bag, please." Cynthia blubbered, but it was very nearly a word of response in some form, so I warned her again. "The contract," I said. "Do not talk to her." "I'll take your face in the bag too, you little piggy," hissed the woman over Cynthia's shoulder and at me. And I was frozen to the spot, just about ready to murmur some frightened reply of my own, when the woman started giggling, put her foot to the pedal and raced off. "What the hell just happened?" asked Cynthia. "I don't." There were no words in my head, no words that would serve to sum up what had just happened, or what I might think had just happened, because I had an idea and that idea wasn't much of anything at all. Unearthly. Something unearthly had just happened. And that sounds stupid, doesn't it? Because it could have all been a prank. It could have been some drunk or mentally unwell woman. Could have been a friend of Frank, the manager we believed to be some sort of psycho, out to get us with his strange rules. Perhaps he had sent somebody to go and mess with us, because he loved wielding power like a hammer over his subservient employees. All of those explanations would have made more sense than the thought in my head, because those explanations, as ludicrous and far-fetched as they may have been, were at the very least grounded in reality, grounded in things that made sense in the world. But I knew what I felt in my gut, knew what I had been feeling in my gut ever since that dread-inducing moment when I had signed the contract, body puppeteered by some external higher force that was unknown to me. I knew that something unexplainable was masking that restaurant, like a fog, and I knew that the woman in the drive-thru was a part of it. "Don't ever talk to the customers," was all I managed to eventually get out to Cynthia, and she nodded. She believed in all of it too. I could see that in her face. The rest of the shift passed without incident, and the two of us slumped silently to our cars at 6 a.m. as the sky remained inky black and the sun showed no sign of even thinking about entering the scene. Frank had been right. That time of day truly was a betwixt time, neither morning nor night. A time that didn't bend to earthly rules, perhaps because it didn't belong to Earth at all. And even when I woke up later that afternoon back in my apartment and far away from yummy burgers, with the sun shining in the sky, I still felt as if I were trapped in that betwixt place, trapped in that otherworldly realm, in a dimension far from ours. There were so many strange occurrences over the following months that many of them have merged into one, perhaps because given time, Cynthia and I managed to desensitize ourselves to the terror of it all. We could hear strange things from drive-through customers and ignore them. We would see the light go off in the main corridor and we would lock the door. We would have a customer asking to take the table nearest to the register, and we would swap out their drink for a blue slushie. It was all very simple, very straightforward. And perhaps we learned the best way to survive was to push it all down and detach ourselves from reality, which yummy burgers had already done for us in a way, I suppose. And one night, about a year or so later, after his monthly pre-morning shift, midnight to 3 a.m., Ian told me something that set my hairs on end. You heard what happened to the guys and gals over at the Wyoming branch. He asked me as we crossed paths in the parking lot. I sighed, readying myself for another frustrating conversation with earache Ian as I had started inwardly calling him. Well, sometimes outwardly when I was trying to make Cynthia laugh. No, Ian, I haven't heard about the Wyoming branch. I'm not in some group chat with various coworkers from different yummy burgers. Oh, really? I am. Well, Steve said he came into work today and the manager rounded them all up in the break room to say the branch was closing down immediately. Something happened to the two guys on the pre-morning shift. Nobody knows what. Management won't say. But whatever's happened, it has to be related to them closing the whole place down, right? Nobody's seen or heard anything from those two guys. Not that they knew them well or anything. It's not like they socialized with the pre-morning workers. Not like you and me, bud, with our blossoming friendship. Oh, please shut up, I thought, but I was kinda allowed. What does Steve think happened? Ian shrugged. I don't think he thought anything about it. Yeah, that sounds about right for a friend of yours, I thought. Well, said Ian with a big sigh, offering Cynthia and me a wave. I'll catch you two on the flip side. Once he was gone, Cynthia chuckled. How old is Ian? Like probably early 20s or something, right? Yeah, I would say he's definitely younger than us. But he says, catch you on the flip side? Something's wrong with that dude. Oh, plenty of things are wrong with that dude, I said gloomily. She frowned. Oh, what's up? You thinking about what he said? I mean, of course I am, aren't you? She shrugged, shrinking into herself a little. Denial and repression seemed to be the tools of her trade when it came to dealing with the horror of working in this place, which seemed tied to otherworldly forces beyond our dizziest comprehensions. Something happened to the workers on the 3 a.m. shift and the whole place shut down. They likely signed the same contract as us. They likely had the same rules too, and they likely saw and heard and felt weird things like us. We don't really know what we're feeling, interrupted Cynthia. Having the heebie-jeebies doesn't mean anything. We've gone over this so many times, it's probably just Frank putting the fear of the devil in us. Oh, come on, it's more than that. You know it is. The way we feel, it's bigger than that. And the things that we've seen from customers are to be expected on the late shift. She interrupted again. I mean, come on, of course customers ordering fast food between 3 and 6 in the morning are the biggest weirdos on the planet. Plus we're working in the middle of the night. I mean, of course we're gonna get creeped out. Who wouldn't? I think you're pretending, Cynthia, I said. But I get it, I want to pretend too. I just don't know whether I have it in me anymore. Not after what Ian just told us. Who cares what happened in Wyoming? That's miles away from us, Jerry. But whatever is going on with the yummy burgers isn't miles and miles away, Cynthia. It's right here. She giggled. Oh, listen to yourself, man. We work at a place called Yummy Burgers. Our manager's a sad old guy named Frank who likes to tell ghost stories. Our contract looks like it was written by a mentally unstable individual. Probably Frank too. This place is a joke and there's nothing scary about it. Well, other than the fact that the two of us are nearly 30 and we really should have found better jobs than this for ourselves at this stage in our lives. And why haven't we, Cynthia? I asked. There are plenty of other restaurants and stores hiring in town. I know you've seen the posters in shop windows. And they do better hours, they do better pay. So why haven't you applied for any of them? She lowered her eyes and shrugged. I'll tell you why. It's that little feeling gnawing away at the two of us, I said. That feeling which is more than just the heebie-jeebies. We know something is wrong with this place and we believe Frank when he tells us that there's no getting out of that contract. There's no leaving. There's no running for our lives. If we were to try, we would die in some horrible way. I don't know how, but... You sound crazy, man. I am crazy. This place has made me crazy. You know that other branch was just like this place, and you know those two guys are gone, and something happened to them. And someday you and I are gonna mess up one of these rules and something will happen to us too. Then this branch will close down and we'll be forgotten just like those other dudes. I mean, I don't even know their names. Did Steve know their names? Sure didn't sound like it. Do you want to be forgotten, Cynthia? Do you want us to go missing without a trace? I felt bad at this point because Cynthia's eyes started to tear up a little and I could sense that I had broken the veil, the one that had shielded her from the truth of this place. She had done a masterful job of keeping it intact and pretending that all was well, when all was quite apparently not well. Now I had become the asshole to ruin that for her, perhaps because I was tired of being the only one facing it all every shift, facing the horror of the unknown, facing those customers coming through the doors, customers who hardly seemed human at all for all I knew. Hey, I'm sorry. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. Oh, get going with the fryer, you asshole. I'm gonna go and clean myself up in the bathroom. I sighed and nodded. It was slow and meaningless work, the kind that can only be tolerated and perhaps the kind that can only be completed at all if one switches onto autopilot. As I've said before, detaching oneself from reality is a skill, the one that Cynthia had mastered to a higher level than me. Mastered it to the extent that, until I made her cry, she was living in total denial as to the true nature of our predicament. It was as I started to really think about that and mull over whether I was becoming an asshole, that I realized I had been standing at the fryer for perhaps 7 or 8 minutes, and Cynthia was still in the bathroom, cleaning up her face and readying herself for our shift. My heart started to race as I looked up at the big analog clock on the wall. It was indeed 9 minutes past 3 in the morning. I had started my shift nearly bang on the dot, so I knew that Cynthia had been in there for longer than 5 minutes. I muttered a little expletive, feeling my heart pound in my chest, and I ignored the ding of the customer entering the building. I instead raced to the door leading to the main corridor and gunned for the women's bathroom. I stood outside the door and hammered at it loudly. "Go away!" Cynthia shouted from inside. "You've been gone longer than 5 minutes. We're not supposed to man the station alone for longer than that." "Well, then let Frank write me up, I don't care." I was panting heavily at this point. Things weren't right. I could feel that they weren't right. "Please, just come out here, Cynthia, and I'll apologize to you properly. I'll grovel, I'll do all of the work this shift. Please, just forgive me, I'll do anything. But I just need you to come out here so that we can..." The door swung open and Cynthia barged out, nearly sending me flying into the wall. "Geez, okay, relax, will you? I just needed a moment. There is no need for all the theatrics. You have every right to be pissed at me, Cynthia, but I'm not pissed at you," she said. And then she lowered her voice as if afraid that somebody might be listening. "I'm pissed at our situation, okay? I'm terrified of this place, you know that. I just don't like to think about it. I don't like us to acknowledge it, alright? We both got suckered into this situation by Frank. We both know that something's wrong with him, but I don't think something's wrong with him, I admitted. I think he was a fool like us who got trapped here. But we gotta follow the rules, Cynthia. We have to do what the contract says. Because I don't think they're just rough guidelines. I think they're the only thing standing between us carrying on like this, as hellish as it may be, or ending up like the Wyoming workers, finished Cynthia. I know, Jerry. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I had been gone longer than 5 minutes. My head was all fuzzy. I wasn't thinking clearly. Hey, same here. I wasn't paying attention to the clock. It's on both of us, and it's fine. We just need to get back to our stations, and I realized that I had broken another rule. I took my eyes off the front of house. Crap. There came a heavy clunk, and then the light in the corridor was gone. Cynthia and I were standing in the pitch black. Not even a sliver of light was entering the hallway from the front of house, and through the oval window of the door separating it from the walkway to the bathrooms. The light to the corridor had mysteriously clunked off maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of the year that Cynthia and I had been working at Yummy Burgers, but this time was different. We weren't safely tucked away in the food prep zone. We were standing in the pitch black corridor ourselves. Move, I whispered to Cynthia. She was way ahead of me, gunning in the black for the door to the safety of our food prep area. When she found the door and held it open for me, letting light spill out into the darkness, I saw something. A figure at the end of the walkway leading to the bathrooms, and he was coming straight for me. Heart nearly leaping out of my throat, I raced towards Cynthia and slammed the door behind us. She screamed when there came the rattle of the door and its hinges, as something wrestled with it from the other side. Wrestled not only with the door handle but with the entirety of the door, threatening to pull it free entirely. I locked it, of course, but as I backed away, I became convinced that even that would not be sufficient to keep out whatever thing stood on the other side. "Hello?" called a customer from the register, seemingly oblivious to the 2 frightened workers and the angry customer trying to break into their workspace. "Is anybody there? I'd like to be served, please." The rattling of the door stopped at that point, as if the customer had broken the concentration of whoever or whatever was on the other side of the door. "I'll handle it," I said to Cynthia, who was jittering on the spot. "You go to the fryer, try to take your mind off of it." She echoed what I had said earlier. "I don't think that's possible anymore, is it, Jerry? We're too far gone. We've seen the truth of this place, and please, just go to the fryer." I missed the oblivious Cynthia. It didn't feel right that we were now both losing our heads. Ironic, isn't it, that I wanted her to be like me until it had happened. Seeing her so fractured and a shell of her former self, I wanted nothing more than for the cheery, airy, and normal girl who had been my colleague for those many months, because she had helped me detach myself from reality on occasion too. She had behaved so normally that I had convinced myself that I was being irrational, convinced myself that there was, in fact, nothing untoward going on. But after that day and whatever we saw in that hallway, Cynthia had stopped pretending. Ian told us more stories as the weeks and then months and then years went by. Stories of other locations closing down, until about a year ago, ours was the last one, and then Ian lost a bit of his sparkle. The distant gossip was no longer distant at all. We were the last man standing, and though Ian knew nothing of the truth behind the pre-morning shift, he clearly seemed worried that whatever had happened to those other places would eventually happen to ours. He had once talked so fondly of the company, and how much he loved his job, but all of that had stopped. His eyes were open. Yummy Burgers was no longer some large and seemingly untouchable corporation that offered decent salaries and relatively easy work. Given how much the company had shrunk, they couldn't afford to pay us as well as they once had. What are you guys actually, Ian started to say once a few months ago, but then he shook his head. Never mind. I know he wanted to ask us about the shift. The guy wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was at least somewhat sharp, not entirely blunt, at the very least, and that meant that he had to have put 2 and 2 together. I realized at this point that I didn't hate Ian. Well, I mean, yes, he was dumb, but he wasn't a bad guy. There's nothing wrong with being dumb after all. What I hated, I think, was that he was so safe and innocent, that he wasn't trapped in this place like Cynthia and me. He could leave at any point. He worked at the restaurant during the day when all was safe and well. I envied him. That had always been the truth of the matter. And at Christmas time, when Ian made a foolish mistake, that envy turned to anger. It was about 5 a.m. on Christmas Eve, and Cynthia and I were on the home stretch. Just an hour until we could go home and put the awfulness out of our heads for a few days as we enjoyed the Christmas break. Anyway, there we were at 5 a.m., enjoying an uneventful shift. "Oh, you've gotta be kidding me," said Cynthia. I came over to the register to see what fresh horror had presented itself, and the last thing I expected to see was Ian standing there yawning and rubbing his eyes. "I got up at the crack of dawn to come see you guys," he said. "What are you doing here? Your shift doesn't start until midday." "I just wanted to see you guys." "At 5 a.m., you're always going on about how you like to sleep until half an hour before your shift starts." "Well, I couldn't sleep last night," he admitted, but I didn't fully believe him. That sheepishness was a misread on my part, I think. It was actually shiftiness. "So I thought maybe I would come and have a bit of an early breakfast here. The sun's nearly up." "The sun is not nearly up," Cynthia scoffed, nodding outside. "It's pitch black out there. You should be in bed, Ian. Go home. Please just go home." "Yeah, you." I paused and tried to collect my thoughts. I wanted to put this nicely for Ian's own benefit. "You don't have to suffer like us, Ian. Go home and go to bed. We'd do the same if we could. We'd work the day shifts." "Well, that's just the thing. Why don't you?" he asked. "I was talking to Steve." Not another Steve story, I thought, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. And he told me something interesting about the pre-morning workers at his branch. None of them ever got to do the day or even the night shift, and none of the day or night shift workers were ever assigned to the pre-morning shift. It's the same as this branch, isn't it? The pre-morning shift is some sort of sacred thing. I asked Frank about it, and he was really weird about it all, like he didn't want to talk about it. "Please, just go home, Ian," I said again. Ian raised a finger and waggled it at me as if scolding me. "You see, that's the problem. Nobody wants to talk about this. And nobody wanting to talk about this is precisely why I want to talk about it. Something's going on with this company. Something's going on between 3 and 6 every morning, and I fully intend on finding out what." "You shouldn't," Cynthia warned. "You should be glad that you don't know." "Cynthia," I hissed, shaking my head. "What?" asked Ian. "Please, one of you just tell me what's happening. Why did the other places close? Why does nobody know anything about what happened to the other pre-morning workers?" "We don't know what happened to them either, so don't ask us," I said. "I didn't know any of those guys. I don't know Steve. I don't know anybody who works for this company other than you two and Frank. It's not all some big conspiracy theory, bud. So please just go home and let us carry on with our work." "What work?" scoffed Ian. "There's nobody here. Well, other than that girl." Cynthia and I froze and shared a concerned look before turning our attention back to Ian. "What girl, Ian?" asked Cynthia. He pointed his finger to the corner, hidden around the side and out of our field of view, and Cynthia and I leaned across the counter to get a better look. And there, sure enough, was a girl crying on a sofa against the wall, face in her hands. Ian, listen to me very carefully. Look away right now, I said. Cynthia and I had already done as much, and I was talking to the day worker without facing him. Ian laughed at the pair of us. What are you two doing? Rule 14, Cynthia said. If you see a crying girl in the front of house with her face in her hands, turn away before she looks at you. Ian laughed harder. Rule 14, what are you? He trailed off and I don't know what happened, but I'm sure the girl must have looked at him at that very moment because it felt as if the entire restaurant had delved into a realm of silence beyond anything possible on our mortal plane of existence. And then, from the absolute quiet, there came only a single word from Ian. More of a sound than a word, I suppose. Oh. And then there was a shriek and all the sound and color returned to the world, and when Cynthia and I turned back to look out at the front of house, Ian was gone. I was the first of us who was brave enough to peer around the side of the wall, and I saw that the girl was gone too. What the? Cynthia didn't manage to finish that sentence. She was hyperventilating and I was rubbing her back, doing my best to help her calm down. Our friend, and perhaps it would be fair for me to call him that, had vanished into thin air. Frank had nothing to say about the matter. He just told us to keep our heads down and keep following the rules and to let the company deal with the matter of Ian's disappearance. And so we did just that. A delivery driver came in and he had the cruelest face that I'd ever seen. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just exuded anger, as if daring me to take longer than 5 minutes to fetch his order. It only took me about 30 seconds to get the bag to him, but that was about 20 seconds longer than usual, because his threatening demeanor made my fingers clammy and buttery. He thanked me sarcastically because I damn near dropped the bag as I passed it to him, and then that was the end of that. Cynthia and I were a collective mess as the weeks went by and we struggled to follow the rules, but we still held everything together. We did everything by the book, and we referred to our contract constantly, trying our very best to remember those 15 absurd rules. Absurd because, despite the seriousness of the consequences, the rules themselves seemed to have been plucked from a word dispenser. Neither Cynthia nor I could see any purpose for any of them. Why did any of it matter? Because this place isn't real, Cynthia told me. Because the customers aren't real, none of it is real. This is a dark place designed to torture its prisoners. We're the prisoners, not the day workers and not the night workers. Maybe not even Frank anymore. Ever since he did whatever he did to get out of the pre-morning shift. This is all about us, Jerry. You and me. Don't you feel that? Don't you feel that the design of this place is purely geared towards tormenting us? I thought about the words she said for the remainder of the morning shift, and as soon as we were done, I phoned him. What did you do? I asked. Frank knew what I was asking. To get out of the contract. Yeah. Well, I broke a rule. I frowned. But that's why the others disappeared, isn't it? Because they broke a rule, like Ian, I mean. Sure, but they broke the wrong rules. I broke the right one. What are you talking about? You've been working at Yummy Burgers for what, 3.5 years? How many times have you seen the blue BMW pull into the parking lot? I shrugged. Maybe a dozen. Yeah, close enough. You've called me 13 times about seeing one. Cynthia's called me 8 times. Well, the next time you see it, I need you to go outside. I shivered. Well, that sounds like it'd be breaking a whole bunch of rules at once. Especially if there's a customer in the building. I don't know, Frank, I don't want to end up like Ian. You want to end up like me though, don't you? Of course, well, it seems better than this at least. Oh, marginally, Jerry. Only marginally. But anyway, if you want to get out of the pre-morning shift, you have to do what I did. Go outside, go up to the driver's side window of the BMW and wait for the man inside to roll it down. What will I see when he does? A human, said Frank. The only human thing linked to this whole darkness. But don't let that settle your stomach. He's the reason for all this. The reason that people get trapped in this place. What did he do? I don't fully know. I just know that he made a deal with something dark, and the price to pay is human souls. You and Cynthia. It's just you two now. The other places fell apart. He's writing everything on this place, so I reckon that he might even give you a better deal than he gave me. Why would he give you a deal when he clearly stated in the rules to call the manager when a blue BMW was spotted? Now that rule was put in there for the manager's sake, more than the employee's sake, said Frank. It's so when we know he's in town, when he expects to see us, when he expects us to pay in a different way. Please stop talking cryptically and just tell me what you mean. No, Jerry, I won't. He has his own way of wording things, and I would only get in trouble if I were to tell you. I would mess it up. He's a very particular man. He's a very, think about it. He's the man that did this to us. The man who made a deal with a very dark and twisted thing to torture people, all for his own personal gain. That should tell you everything about him in itself. Anyway, look, I've told you what to do if you want to get yourself out of this mess, but there are still no guarantees, Jerry. I've got no idea whether he'll give you the same deal he gave me. But if you want a shot, then the next time you see that BMW, you'll break all the other rules and go out there and talk to him, the man behind this cursed restaurant. And so I waited and waited, but no car came, and I think that I would have done it. I think I would have gone up to him and talked to him, the mystery owner of this restaurant chain, if it hadn't been for what happened during yesterday's shift. Now I don't know what the future holds for me. It was 5:45 in the morning. I remember looking eagerly at the clock and thinking that, despite the BMW driver not showing his face, at least I was only 15 minutes away from being able to go home. 15 minutes away from getting a break from Yummy Burgers, which was always sorely needed after those 3-hour stints from hell. Have you thought about it anymore? I asked Cynthia. Do you think he'll come out with me and talk to the man when he next shows up? I know it's scary to break the rules, but I really think this could be our shot to get out of here. To end up like Frank with a somewhat better life, I suppose. As Cynthia was being more reserved than usual, facing away from me into the front entrance, I thought that she had seen something, but there was no one there. Hello, Earth to Cynthia. I grabbed her shoulder and spun her around, and that was when my flesh froze. Swimming in her right eye were 2 pupils, the second being a black dot that orbited the ordinary brown pupil, like a malignant moon. And I stumbled back from her, the girl who had been rendered a zombified husk as some parasitic thing swam about in her eye, and wondered how I could have forgotten about that rule. The rule which had always, in the early days of working for Yummy Burgers, terrified me the most. As Cynthia and I had spent so long worrying about the customers that we had forgotten about the rule which always loomed over us, threatening to consume us at a moment's notice. Rule 16. It's gonna be okay, Cynthia. It's all gonna be okay. I stammered as I shuffled on my behind towards the wall, ignoring the ding of a customer entering the shop. I was scrolling down to Frank's name in my contact list. It's all gonna be... Our manager picked up the phone. Oh, Frank, thank God you're here. Is the boss there? And go outside, Jerry, and... No, I interjected, a voice stammering. It's Cynthia. She's got the second pupil in her eye. Christ, whispered Frank. Polychoria it's not good, Jerry. We don't have long to save her. You need to do exactly as I say. Hello, Mr. Man down there, announced a customer heartily, leaning over the counter to look down at me. Seems your coworker's a little under the weather, so how about you serve me instead, huh? I gulped. 1 second, sir, I'm on the phone too. Oh, it could be the queen for all I care, but I still want to be served. Oh wait, the queen's dead, ain't she? Kinda like your friend over there will be soon enough. Unless you get me some fries, that is. So how about you get me some fries, son? I felt paralyzed as I looked at the customer looming over me, looking down with those inhuman eyes that each of the monstrous pre-morning customers had in their sockets. It was rare for a customer to be this outspoken and so obvious about their true nature, but the lack of subtlety reared its head in Yummy Burger's diners from time to time. Staring into his eyes, I thought back to that first drive-thru customer who had asked for a Cynthia's face in a bag. This man looked exactly like her in a way. He might have been her. Every customer might have been the same thing. The same dark thing that did a deal with the owner of the business. I wondered what that boss had received in return for our souls, and the customer answered as if reading my mind. If you want us to keep playing with our food rather than eating it, he said, nodding at Cynthia as if she were the real meal, then you better do as I say. I leapt to my feet and shoveled fries into a bag, ignoring the cackling of the man over the other side of the counter, and then he snatched them from me and his face dropped, adopting a very solemn expression. You'd better act quickly if you want to save your friend. Have a blessed day, little worm. Is he gone? Frank asked from the other end of the phone. I had forgotten that he was on the line, and so I lifted the device back up to my ear and cleared my throat. He's going now. The doorbell rang over his head as he exited. He's gone. Good, now describe Cynthia to me, Frank said. I took a look at her. I think I felt myself go pale. Oh, it's changed. The pupil, it's lighter now. Gray. Well, I suppose so, somewhere between gray and black. Oh, that's good, Jerry, that's really good. As long as you can still see it. Once it's merged into the white of the sclera, that's when it's too late. What do you mean? I asked weakly. Just do as I say. Take Cynthia to the freezer and lock her in there until the end of her shift. And so I did just that. I dragged my friend, who was a lifeless husk with twice or perhaps thrice her usual weight. It definitely didn't align with her mass, or the mass that I could see with the naked eye, carrying with it a heaviness that I could not possibly hope to see or comprehend in this mortal dimension of existence. Just a little further, Cynthia, I grunted. And then when I got her into the freezer, Frank said, Right, now close the door and wait until your shift ends in 10 minutes. Then she should be okay. The thing should be gone. What is it? I don't know, Jerry, just shut the bloody door. Okay. I did just that and breathed a sigh of relief. Will she be okay, though? She will, said Frank with the most confidence that I had ever heard in his old, weathered, and often terrified voice. 11 minutes to go and you'll see for yourself, Jerry. So just... Cynthia. The word was whispered from the depths of the freezer and my eyes widened. Frank, did you... I heard. Did it come from the freezer? Yeah, Frank, I need to get her out of there. No, you need to follow the rule. Go and wait by the cash register and stay by your station for the next 10 minutes. That rule applies to whoever has his or her name uttered. It was Cynthia. It said her name. I heard it and you heard it. I need to get her out of there and back to the register, so... Fine. Yes, I know, fine, just hurry. If she's not in that freezer when your shift ends at 6 o'clock, she'll stay that way. Lost forever in a purgatory of... Well, I don't know. I don't know what that thing in her eye is doing to her. The same thing that all the monsters do in this place. Torment and torture. And it'll be doing that to her for all of eternity if you don't have her back in that freezer at 6. So hurry, now. I threw open the freezer door and caterwauled in a mixture of horror and grief. She was gone. Jerry, began Frank. Shut up. You did this to us. You did this to her. Where did she go? What happened to her? The same thing that happens to all of them, Jerry. I'm so sorry. Why did you tell us about this job? Why would you condemn anyone to this role? Because I'm a coward, Jerry, and that was part of my deal. I find people to fill the two roles, or I fill one of them myself. You should be the one this place vanished, not her. I know. So fix it. I can't, or I don't know how if I can. You're gonna help me fix this. There is no fixing it, Jerry. I'll find somebody else to do the shift with you, and we'll keep waiting for the boss to arrive at the branch, okay? It's been a few months, so he must be planning on gracing us with his presence soon. And when he does, you'll go to him, you'll talk to him. You'll find a way of being granted some measure of freedom, like I have, and what? I'll end up like you. A monster who sentences fresh meat to the slaughter in an endless cycle. No, that sounds like a different kind of nightmare, Frank. I don't want that. I don't want any of that. What happens if I go missing too? Well, we fill your role. Don't talk like that, Jerry. No, I mean, what happens if I go missing before you fill my role? Before you fill Cynthia's role? The cogs clearly turned and Frank said, Jerry, you don't want to do this. I do, I said. I want this branch to close just like all the others. And that was what did it, wasn't it? When the stations were unmanned, the dark thing was displeased. Am I right? It's more complicated than that. This is the last stronghold, Jerry, and if you shut it down, well, then something terrible happens to you, right? I'm sorry about that, Frank, but it's not right. You saving yourself and sentencing other people to terrible fates in your place. Frank sounded on the verge of tears. You don't understand. The man behind all of this won't just give up if this empire falls. He'll just forge a new deal with them somehow. I don't know what. I still don't understand how all of this works, but I know that he always survives. So all you'll be doing is sentencing the two of us to death, Jerry. I'm okay with that, I said. There is a customer sitting at a table in the middle of the front of house. I stepped out from behind the cash register, went and sat opposite him, and he smiled at me. I take odd jobs because they don't come with meetings. No onboarding videos, no circle back, no polite emails when somebody says, per my last message, like they're filing a complaint with the universe. You get a text, you get an address, you do a thing and you get paid. That's the deal. Most of the time it's normal stuff people don't want to bother with. Moving a couch up 3 flights because their buddy bailed. Hauling trash to a dump because their truck is in the shop. Sitting in a guy's driveway for an hour to make sure the tow company doesn't hook his car again. Picking up a pallet of bottled water for a woman who swore she would tip and then didn't. I don't ask why. Not because I'm brave, but because the less you know, the less you carry. The only rule I keep for myself is simple. If it feels wrong, I leave. I broke that rule on February 14th because rent doesn't care about gut feelings. The text came in around noon. From an unknown number it said, need a courier, 1 package delivered today, $300 cash. Reply yes for address. $300 for a delivery sounded like either a scam or something that involved a dog that would bite me. Normally I would ignore it. I had been staring at my bank app that morning, watching the numbers like they might get better if I stared long enough. They didn't. My landlord didn't do understanding. He did late fees. I typed back, yes. The response popped in immediately like it had been waiting. Horizon Arms Apartments, 1497 Kittredge Avenue, top floor, Unit 12C. Leave package at door. Knock 3 times, wait 10 seconds, leave. Do not open package, do not enter unit. Payment in envelope under lobby mailboxes. Horizon Arms. I knew the building even if I hadn't been inside. Everybody in town knew it. Tall, ugly, brown brick apartment complex from the 70s. 12 stories, a block off the bus line. It had been temporarily closed for years after a fire and to mess with code violations and squatters, and the kind of place you only saw in the background of local news stories when they were talking about urban blight and a hazard to the community. I stared at the address long enough that my thumb went numb. I texted back, "Building's abandoned. How am I supposed to get in?" Side door, West Alley, code 0314. Use stairs, elevator disabled. 314. The code looked neat, too clean to be random. I thought about replying again, telling myself to ask who they were, demanding some kind of proof this wasn't going to end with me on the wrong side of a locked door. I did it anyway. "Who is this?" No response. I sat there on my couch, a phone in my hand, listening to my refrigerator click on and off like it was making decisions. My place was quiet except for the neighbor's TV bleeding through the wall. There was a laugh track. Somebody was having a better day than me. I told myself that it was probably nothing. Somebody had moved out and left keys and didn't want to deal with it. Somebody was using the building as storage. Somebody was pulling a Valentine stunt and thought a creepy delivery would be cute. I checked the thread again. No new messages. $300. I put on my boots. I grabbed my cheap work gloves because they were already by the door. I checked my pocket for my car keys and my wallet and the little folding knife that I carry for boxes and nothing else. I considered bringing a flashlight, and then I told myself it was daytime and I wasn't going to be up there long. I brought my phone charger instead, because that's the kind of priority your brain sets when you don't want to think about something else. Before I left, I called my friend Nolan. He's the guy that I call when I want to hear somebody say something obvious so that I can pretend it was my idea. He answered on the third ring. "Yo." "Hey, quick question," I said. "You finally gonna pay me back?" "I'm thinking about taking a delivery job," I said, "to Horizon Arms." He didn't talk for a second. "The abandoned building?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, that's not a job. That's a setup." "It's 300 cash," I said. "You just said it like it makes it safer," he said. "You got an address, a company name?" "No company," I admitted. "Just a text. They say there's cash under the mailboxes." Nolan exhaled hard through his nose. "Man, don't." "I'm already halfway there mentally," I said, trying to keep it light. "I'm serious. If you go, at least do the dumb safety stuff. Text me the address, call me when you're done. And if your gut does anything besides, fine. You leave." "Yeah, I know," I said. "Oh, do you? But if this ends with you on the news, I'm gonna be mad at you in the afterlife." "Noted," I said. I hung up and sent him a text with the address in a quick line. "If I'm not back in an hour, tell my landlord that I tried." "Not funny. Don't go." I didn't answer him. I stopped at a gas station and bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum that I didn't want. The cashier looked at me and said, "Are you good?" Like he could see something in my face. "Yeah," I said, and I walked out. On the drive over, I kept catching myself looking at the rearview mirror too often. Nothing was behind me, it was just out of habit. I checked the time twice like it mattered. I checked my phone thread again like it would suddenly say, "Oh, never mind, wrong guy." Kittredge Avenue was one of those streets where the buildings get taller and the trees get thinner. Horizon Arms sat back from the road behind a dead patch of grass and a chain-link fence that had been cut and retied in a dozen places. Somebody had hung a no trespassing sign on the fence at some point. Somebody else had shot it full of holes. I parked across the street because there wasn't anywhere to park close that didn't feel like I was volunteering my car to get broken into. I looked at the building through my windshield. It didn't look abandoned in the dramatic way. No boards over every window, no vines swallowing it whole. It looked abandoned in a quieter way, like a place that had been ignored and was fine staying that way. A few windows on the lower floors were broken. The glass was gone and jagged teeth left in the frames. There was graffiti on the first floor brick, thick and layered, tags over tags. The lobby doors were intact but chained. I could see straight through to the lobby. It was dim even in the daylight. No movement, no people. I held the package on my lap for a second and I looked at it like it might explain itself. It was a shoebox-sized cardboard box, plain brown sealed with clean tape. No return address, no label. Just a black marker line on the top. 12C. It didn't smell like anything. It wasn't heavy. It didn't rattle when I moved it. It felt like somebody had put a smaller box inside of a bigger one, so it didn't shift. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. I got out. The air was cold enough to sting my nose. There were a couple people down the street near the bus stop. A guy pushing a cart full of cans, traffic humming along. Normal life. 10 yards away from a building that wasn't. I crossed to the fence opening and I stepped through. The grass crunched under my boots like it was dead on purpose. Near the front steps was a pile of old mail. Yellowed envelopes and pizza coupons and somebody's utility bill from years ago. Somebody had dumped it out and never bothered to pick it up. I went around the side into the west alley like the text had said. The alley was narrow, lined with overflowing dumpsters from the neighboring buildings. It smelled like old grease and damp cardboard. The side of Horizon Arms had a metal door halfway down painted gray. The paint was bubbled and chipped. Above it, a security light hung crooked and dead. There was a keypad mounted beside the door. Up close, I noticed something that I should have clicked sooner. The keypad was newer than the door. Not brand new, but newer enough that the plastic hadn't yellowed. The mounting plate had fresh screw heads, silver against old paint, like it had been reinstalled recently. Somebody was maintaining at least this part of the building, even if the rest had looked like it had been abandoned. I keyed in 0314. The keypad beeped. The red light turned green. I stood there for a second with my hand on the handle waiting for the gotcha, waiting for the door not to open, waiting for an alarm, waiting for a voice through a speaker asking me what I was doing here. Nothing. The handle was cold. The door opened inward with a soft scrape, like it had been opened recently enough that the hinges still worked. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not sewage, not anything obvious. It smelled like stale air and old carpet and something faintly sweet underneath, like cheap air freshener used to cover something else years ago. It made my throat tighten. The hallway beyond the door was dim. There were no lights on. and daylight came in through the doorway behind me and a few broken windows further in, but it didn't reach far. I stepped inside and pulled the door closed behind me out of habit. It latched with a muted click. The air got colder without the outside air moving. I stood still and listened. Nothing moved. No dripping, no mice, no distant voices, no elevator cables groaning, no AC, no anything. Buildings always make noise, even empty ones. This one was just quieter than it should have been. I turned back to the door. There was a push bar on the inside and a keypad panel with a green light. If I had to leave, I could. I walked forward, keeping close to the wall. My boots scuffed dust off the floor. The carpet runner that used to line the hallway was gone, leaving bare concrete with dark stains where it had been. At the end was a stairwell door with an exit sign above that wasn't lit. Next to it was a lobby entrance with cracked glass doors. I could see the lobby through it. Mailboxes lined one wall, metal doors bent and peeled back like somebody had forced them open with a crowbar. The front desk sat behind a pane of glass that was webbed with cracks. Papers lay on the floor, curled at the edges like they had been damp once and dried out wrong. The envelope was supposed to be under the lobby mailboxes. I didn't want to cross that lobby. Still, part of me wanted to confirm the money existed before I climbed 12 flights. I pushed the lobby door open. It swung wide, too easy, and the sound echoed. My footsteps sounded loud in there. The lobby amplified everything like it wanted attention. I walked to the mailboxes and crouched. The metal was cold and I slid my fingers under the bottom row. My fingertips brushed paper. I pulled out a white envelope. No name, just cash written in block letters. I opened it. 300 in crisp bills, folded clean. No joke money, no, I got you. My stomach loosened a little, which annoyed me. Like my body had been waiting for permission to trust this. I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket and forced myself not to count it again. I didn't want to stand in that lobby 1 second longer than I had to. The stairwell door was heavy, metal, and painted the same gray as the side door. I pushed it open. The stairwell smelled like concrete and old smoke. The sound of my breathing got trapped in it, bouncing back at me. There were steps going up and down. I didn't need the down one, so I started up. The first few flights weren't bad. My legs warmed up. The box didn't weigh much, but holding it made my arms feel occupied, like I couldn't react fast if I needed to. I shifted it under one arm so my other hand was free. On the second floor landing, I glanced through the wired glass window in the hallway door without thinking. The hallway beyond was darker than the one that I had entered from. Some apartment doors were open, not wide but cracked, like somebody had pushed them and left them like that. The shadows inside those units looked dense and packed into corners. I kept climbing. By the fourth floor, my breathing was louder. The stairwell was the same all the way up. Gray walls, chipped paint, rust stains under the handrail brackets. On one landing, somebody had spray painted a smiley face with X's for eyes. On the sixth, there were scratch marks on the inside of the stairwell door at about chest height. Deep grooves through paint into metal. It looked like somebody had raked it with something hard. I slowed down, staring at it. Maybe a tool. Maybe somebody had tried to pry it open. Maybe kids. It didn't match kids clean. I kept climbing anyway. The higher I went, the colder it got. Not dramatically, but enough that my fingertips started to feel stiff even through the gloves. My sweat cooled fast. Around the ninth floor landing, I started noticing something else. A faint sound that didn't match my steps. A low tone like somebody humming far away. It wasn't clear enough to recognize a tune, just a steady hum that rose and fell. I stopped on the landing and held my breath. The humming continued. It didn't sound like it was echoing up the stairwell from below. It sounded level, like it was on one of the floors behind a door. And then the humming stopped all at once. The silence after it was worse. I started moving again faster now because I didn't like standing still when something might be listening. By the time that I had reached the 12th floor, my thighs were burning and my shirt was damp under my jacket. The stairwell door to the hallway had a little number plate on it. 12. Someone had scratched it with something sharp. I pushed the door open. The hallway outside was darker than the floors below. There were no broken windows on this floor that I could see, which meant no daylight. The only light came from the stairwell behind me and it didn't reach far. The air smelled different up here. Not just stale, there was something like wet metal to it. I didn't move at first. I let my eyes adjust. The hall was long and straight, carpeted, and a dirty, flattened runner that still clung to the floor. Apartment doors lined both sides. Most were closed. A couple were open a few inches. At the far end, a red exit sign glowed faintly above another stairwell door, but the light was weak, like it was running on a dying backup battery. Unit numbers were on plaques next to each door. 12A, 12B, 12C. It was on the left side about halfway down. I started walking. My footsteps were muffled by the carpet. Quiet footsteps make it feel like you're sneaking even when you're not trying to. Halfway down the hall, the smell got stronger. I passed a door with the plaque missing. The door itself had a strip of duct tape across the peephole. Another had something dark smeared around the handle and dried and flaky. My stomach had tightened again. I tried swallowing and I felt my throat stick. I had reached 12C. The door looked newer than the others. Not brand new, but less worn. The peephole didn't have tape. The paint wasn't chipped as bad. There was a clean strip of masking tape along the bottom edge, like somebody had sealed it at some point, and then peeled it and replaced it, and then replaced it again. No sounds from inside. No TV, no movement. I stepped up to it. The box felt suddenly heavier in my hands, and not because it weighed more, but because it had become the entire reason that I was there. I set it down in front of the door right under the peephole. I stood up. My fingers were cold. My heart was thumping hard enough that I could feel it in my jaw. The text said, "Knock 3 times, wait 10 seconds, leave." I knocked. 3 firm knocks with my knuckles and not too loud. I waited. 1, 2, 3. At around 5 seconds, I heard something. Not from inside the unit, from down the hall at the far end past the dim exit sign. A sound like a pig squealing. Not a vague animal noise. The specific, ugly sound of a pig when it's scared or hurt. High, wet, panicked, with a breathy wheeze under it. My whole body went still. The squeal cut off abruptly like somebody had covered an animal's mouth. Then silence again. I kept my eyes on 12C's door for another second, like it might open and explain everything. It didn't. The 10 seconds were up and I should have left. Instead, I did what people do when they hear something wrong in an empty place. I looked down the hallway. At first, I didn't see anything. Just darkness and closed doors and that weak red exit sign. And then at the far end, movement. Someone stepped into view from around a corner near the exit stairwell. A man. At least it was shaped like a man. He was tall and thin, a hoodie, jeans, work boots. His posture was relaxed, like he was out for a walk. His head was tilted slightly like he was listening to something that I couldn't hear. And then he took another step into the weak light. He was wearing a pig mask. Not a cheap Halloween one, it covered his whole face. Pinkish rubber, snout, little ears, glossy black eye holes that didn't show anything behind them. The kind of mask that tries too hard to be realistic, which makes it even worse. I stared at him and my brain tried to make it less real. Maybe it's a prank, maybe it's a squatter. And then I remembered the squeal. The man in the pig mask lifted his head a little like he had finally noticed me. He didn't rush, he didn't shout. He just started walking toward me at an even pace. And he was humming, softly, like somebody humming to themselves while they cooked dinner. I backed up one step. He kept walking. I backed up again. My shoulder brushed 12C's door. The box was on the floor between us like an offering. The pig-masked man didn't look at it, didn't even glance down. He kept coming and humming. My mouth went dry, my hands were cold inside my gloves. I tried to make my voice do something useful. "Hey," I called, loud enough to fill the hall. "Wrong floor, man." No response. The humming continued. He took another step. I snapped out of the freeze and turned to run back toward the stairwell. The hallway behind me was darker now than it had been when I had entered. I could still see the stairway door at the far end, but it felt further away than it should have. The carpet grabbed at my boots. I sprinted. My breathing got loud fast. And behind me, the humming didn't get louder the way the footsteps would. It stayed steady, like he wasn't running, like he didn't need to. That made my skin crawl. I reached the spot where the hallway widened slightly near a maintenance closet. My foot hit something low, something that I didn't see in the dark. A tight, sudden pull. The world yanked sideways. I went down hard. My hands shot out to catch myself, a palm slamming into the carpet. My knee hit next, a sharp jolt, and then pain exploded in my left leg. Not a clean pain, not a simple cut. It felt like my leg got grabbed and dragged through a metal fence. I screamed and I couldn't stop it. I twisted, trying to see what I had hit, and my left leg moved wrong. Not broken, but pulled tight against something. Barbed wire. A line of barbed wire strung low across the hallway, anchored to a door handle on one side and a pipe on the other. It was stretched taut like a trip line. The barbs weren't small, thick twisted points, the kind that they used on fences. When I had hit it at full speed, it hadn't just tripped me, it had caught my leg and ripped. My jeans were shredded from mid-shin up toward my knee. Underneath, my skin was open in jagged lines. Blood was already soaking through dark and fast. I could see pale tissue under torn skin. The pain hit in waves that made my stomach flip and my vision pulse. I grabbed the wire with both hands without thinking, trying to pull it away. The barbs bit my gloves and the wire didn't budge. I yanked again, harder. Pain lanced up my leg so sharp that my vision went gray for a second. I heard the humming. Closer now. I twisted my head toward the darkness behind me. The pig-masked man rounded the corner at the far end of the hallway like he was strolling around a grocery aisle, humming the whole time. When he saw me on the floor caught in the wire, he didn't react like a normal person would. No surprise, no excitement. He just stopped and tilted his head. The humming continued. My hands were shaking so bad that I could barely grip the wire anymore. My throat tasted like metal. "Hey!" I yelled, voice cracking. "Stay back!" He took another step. I scrambled, dragging myself backward with my hands, trying to pull my leg toward me. The wire held. I could still feel warm blood running down into my boot, pooling at my heel. He got within maybe 20 feet. I could see the texture of the mask now. Small cracks in the rubber, grime in the creases around the snout. The black eye holes were empty. No eyes visible behind them. Just darkness. The humming stopped. He lifted one hand, slow like he was about to wave, and then he put his hand down again like he had changed his mind. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I grabbed the barbed wire with both hands again, braced my right foot against the carpet and yanked with everything that I had. The wire snapped free from whatever it was tied to on the right side. The sudden release made me jerk backward, and the wire ripped across my left leg again as it went slack. I screamed so loud that it hurt my own ears, but my leg was free. I tried to stand and my left leg buckled immediately. It wasn't just pain, it was the leg not wanting to take any weight. My boot felt wet inside. I crawled, hands and knees, dragging my left leg behind me like it belonged to somebody else. The pig-masked man started walking again. Not fast, not slow, just steady. His boots made soft sounds on the carpet. I reached the stairwell door at the end of the hall like it was a finish line. My fingers fumbled for the push bar. It was cold and smooth, and I shoved it. The door didn't open. For a split second, my brain refused it. I shoved again harder. Still nothing. This wasn't a normal locked feeling. It was like the door was physically jammed, like something had wedged it from the other side. And then I saw the detail that I had missed in the dark. The bottom edge of the door had a strip of torn carpet bunched up underneath it, jammed tight. The old runner in the hallway was frayed. Somebody could have kicked a wad of it under the door in seconds and turned it into a wedge. The pig-masked man was closer now, 15 feet, 10. He started humming again. Not the same tune, a different little pattern, like he was picking something at random. My hand slapped around on the floor for anything solid. My fingers hit something metal near the baseboard, a broken piece of pipe, maybe from a railing bracket. I grabbed it and hooked it down near the bottom edge of the door where the carpet wad was jammed. I pried. The carpet tore with a rough ripping sound and the humming stopped. The pig-masked man leaned forward slightly like the sound mattered to him. I pried again harder. The wad pulled free enough that the door shifted a fraction. I could feel it give, a tiny movement that said it wasn't locked and just stuck. I dropped the pipe and shoved with both hands. The door opened. Cold stairwell air rushed out, smelling like concrete and old smoke. I hauled myself through the doorway, dragging my left leg over the threshold. The door started to swing shut behind me, heavy on its hinges. I looked back one last time as it closed. The pig-masked man didn't rush to stop it. He didn't grab the door. He stood in the hallway's dim light, perfectly still. As the gap narrowed, he lifted something up in front of his chest. A sign. White poster board, thick black letters. Be my Valentine. And in the corner, a small red heart, like a kid would draw on a card. For a second, I saw his hand holding it. Bare, pale skin, clean nails. A normal hand. And then the door shut. The latch caught. The sign vanished. The hallway vanished. I sat on the concrete landing inside the stairwell, panting like I had been running for miles. My left leg was a mess. Blood pooled on the step under my calf and ran in a thin line down toward the lower landing. My phone felt slick in my hand when I pulled it out, like sweater blood had gotten on it. I hit 911. A calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need help. My voice sounded wrong, too thin. I'm in Horizon Arms Apartments, the abandoned building on Kittredge. I'm injured. There is a brief pause. Sir, can you confirm the address? 1497 Kittredge, I said. West side, I got in through the alley door. Please, I need an ambulance. My leg's cut up bad. Okay. Stay on the line with me. Are you in immediate danger right now? There was somebody in there, I said. A man wearing a pig mask. And where is he now? I don't know, I said. I'm in the stairwell, 12th floor. Listen to me. Can you secure the stairwell door? Is there a lock on your side? I looked at the door. It had a little thumb-turned deadbolt. My hand shook as I reached up and turned it. It clicked into place. Yes, I said. Locked. Okay, good. Do not go back into the hallway. I need you to apply pressure to the wound. Do you have anything you can use, a shirt or a jacket? My jacket, I said. Okay, use it. Firm pressure and tell me your name. I gave it my full name because suddenly I wanted to be very real and very traceable. The operator asked the usual things. My age, allergies, medications, if I could wiggle my toes. I did because if I couldn't, that meant something worse than pain. I took my jacket off with clumsy hands and I pressed it against my leg. The moment that the fabric had touched the torn skin, I made a sound I didn't mean to make. The dispatcher stayed calm like they had heard it 1,000 times before. Keep that pressure. Help is on the way. Just stay with me. Minutes didn't feel like minutes. They felt like long pieces of time that I had to drag myself through. Every now and then, I thought that I heard something on the other side of the stairwell door. A scrape, a soft thump. Then it would stop and I'd be left listening to my own breathing. Eventually, I heard voices below me in the stairwell. Boots on steps, radios. Sir, the dispatcher said. Call out so that they can locate you. I'm up here, 12th floor. A voice echoed back up, muffled but real. Please, stay where you are, we're coming up. Relief hit me so hard that my eyes stung. 2 officers came up first, flashlights cutting clean beams through the dim. One had his hand on his belt like he was ready to draw. The other kept his light moving, methodical. Hey, the closer one said when he saw me. His voice softened slightly. You called. Yeah, I said, that's me. He knelt a few feet away, angled his light down on my leg and swore under his breath. His partner moved to the stairwell door and tested it. Locked from the inside, he said. I locked it, I told them. He was out there. Who? The kneeling officer asked. A man, I said, in a pig mask. They exchanged a look, quick and professional. The paramedics arrived right behind them. A woman introduced herself as Marcy. Calm face, steady hands. Hey, we're gonna take care of you, just keep looking at me. Don't look down unless you have to. They wrapped my leg with pressure bandages. It hurt in a blunt, deep way that made me want to shove their hands away, but I didn't. I could feel the bleeding slow under the pressure. And they got me onto a stretcher and started carrying me down. And by the time that we had reached the lobby, daylight poured in through the forced front doors. More officers were there now. Radios, flashlights. A couple of them had gloves on like they were already anticipating evidence. They rolled me out onto the sidewalk. Cold air hit my face. Street sounds hit my ears. Cars, a dog barking somewhere, somebody's music thumping from a passing car. Normal. I started shaking anyway. Marcy climbed into the ambulance with me and said, We're heading to the ER. You're gonna need stitches and maybe staples. You're gonna be okay though. One of the officers leaned into the open doors and asked, Sir, before you go, how'd you get in? A side door, I said. Keypad, West Alley. Code 0314. He nodded. And you said payment was under the lobby mailboxes. Yes, I said. Do you still have the cash? I realized then that the envelope was still in my jacket pocket. Yes, I said. Take it, I don't want it. He nodded. We'll collect it. At the hospital, they cleaned and stitched and stapled until my leg looked like it had been put back together by somebody who didn't have time to make it pretty. A doctor said words like deep lacerations and risk of infection, and you're lucky it didn't hit the artery. He asked me if I had gotten a tetanus shot already. I told him I didn't remember, and he gave me one anyway. Later, a detective came in, plain clothes, tired eyes, a notebook in hand. She took my statement, I got a case number, and she told me flat out not to reply if the number contacted me again, and to call her directly. I told her everything. The text, the code, the envelope, the humming, the procedure of delivery, the squeal, the pig mask, the barbed wire, the sign. When I finished, she asked me, Do you have the text thread? Yeah, it's on my phone. I handed it over. She scrolled, her eyes moved fast, and then she frowned. She held the screen toward me. The thread was still there, but it didn't look the way that it had in my car. Instead of a normal number, it showed a generic sender label, like one of those burner text apps that routes messages through random IDs. And instead of the conversation, there is a blank screen with a single line at the top. Conversation expired. Like the app had auto-deleted the history. I'm not making this up, I said. There was cash under the mailboxes. She nodded. Yes, we recovered the envelope. We recovered cash, but no usable prints. You went up, I asked. When we cleared the building, we didn't locate anyone matching your description. We did find blood on the 12th floor carpet consistent with your injury. What about the barbed wire? I asked. No wire on scene when officers had reached that floor, she said. What about the package? I asked. We did not locate a package outside of 12C, she said. I set it down, I knocked, I saw it there. I understand. She said that in a careful voice. Was 12C locked? 12C's door was open. I stared at the ceiling tiles until my eyes burned. She flipped another page. There's a service corridor on that floor. Maintenance access. It runs behind the units. Our officers found a panel door at the end of the hall that leads into it. My stomach tightened. The roof hatch was unlatched, padlock missing, fresh scuff marks on the ladder rungs. If he wanted to move without using the main hallways or get off that floor fast, he could. So you're saying that he got away? I'm saying the building gives somebody a lot of places to hide. There's no cameras inside and half the exterior coverage is dead. And the corridor isn't on the old plans that we could pull. We're doing what we can. She left her card on my tray and told me again, don't engage, don't go back, and don't try to be a hero. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time that I drifted, I heard the humming, soft and steady like a tune that you can't place but can't shake either. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A notification banner flashed at the top of my screen. Not a full message, just the little preview you get when something comes in. Thank you for delivering. I snatched the phone so fast that I almost dropped it. When I opened my messages, there was nothing new. No thread, no sender, nothing in my inbox. Like the preview had popped up and the message never fully came through. Like the app had tried to load it and it failed. My hand started shaking harder this time. I didn't reply, I didn't even type. I called the detective's number. It rang. When she answered, I said, "It tried to message me again. I saw the preview." "What did it say?" "Thank you for delivering." There was a pause and I heard her breathing on the other end, steady but tight. "Okay," she said. "Don't touch anything else on your phone. Don't delete anything. Screenshot your notification history if you can. I'm gonna send somebody by." "I can't screenshot it. It's gone." "That's all right. Just stay where you are." After I hung up, I stared at my blank screen until my eyes hurt. Outside my window, the world kept going. Cars passed, people walked, and somebody laughed. And I thought that I heard a squeal in the distance. My name is Nate Garland, and for the last 14 months, I've been the sole law enforcement officer assigned to Canvik, Alaska. Population 312 in the summer, maybe 240 in the winter, depending on who decides to ride out the dark months and who heads south. I transferred up from Anchorage after my divorce. There was an opening that nobody wanted, and the pay differential for remote postings was good enough to help me crawl out from under the debt that Lisa and I had split down the middle. And that's the whole story behind why I came here. No grand purpose, no calling to serve the frontier. I needed the money, and I needed to be somewhere that my ex-wife's new boyfriend wasn't going to show up at the same grocery store. Canvik sits where a gravel road dead ends against the northern coast. There's a fuel depot, a general store that doubles as a post office, a small medical clinic staffed by a rotating nurse practitioner who flies in on 2-week shifts, and a tribal council building that serves as the center of everything that matters in town. My office is a converted storage unit attached to a small cabin that the department leases from the borough. The cabin smells like diesel and old carpet, and the office has a desk, a radio, a gun safe, and a space heater that clicks every 40 seconds like a metronome. The prior officer was a guy named Walt Dreyer. He left the posting 8 months early without finishing his contract. The official paperwork had said medical leave. When I had asked my lieutenant about it before I shipped up, he just said that Walt had a rough winter and left it at that. I didn't push. At the time, I figured the isolation got to him. It gets to a lot of people. My daily work is mostly quiet. Welfare checks on elders during the storms, fuel disputes, the occasional domestic call that needs a calm voice more than a badge. I work alone. The nearest backup is a state trooper station about a 90-minute flight south. And that's in good weather. In bad weather, which is most weather from October through April, I'm on my own entirely. The darkness is the first thing that gets to you. I had read about it before I came, but reading about it and living it are two completely different things. In deep winter, the sun doesn't come up at all. Not for weeks. You get a few hours of gray twilight around noon, this thin band of lighter sky along the southern horizon, and then it's dark again. Not dusk, dark. 22 hours of full night. Your sleep cycle falls apart inside the first week. Your sense of time starts to slip. You'll be sitting at your desk thinking that it's early evening, and you'll check the clock and it's 3 in the morning. Or you'll feel like you just woke up and it turns out that you've been awake for 19 hours. You stop trusting clocks because the numbers don't connect to anything that your body recognizes. There's no sunrise to reset you, no afternoon light to mark the halfway point of a day. Just dark, then gray, and then dark again. The other thing that happens, and nobody warns you about this, is that the darkness changes the way you think about the land around you. During the summer months, Canvik sits in a landscape you can see and understand. Tundra, coastline, mountains in the distance, and the ocean stretching out blue and wide. You can orient yourself. You know what's out there. But in winter, the darkness swallows all of it. The town becomes an island of light in a void that could contain anything. And your imagination, whether you want it to or not, starts populating that void. But the thing about the darkness that nobody tells you is what it does to your trust in your eyes. When you're out on patrol, driving the coast road with your headlights cutting a tunnel through the black, everything outside that tunnel might as well not exist. Your brain starts filling in the gaps. Shadows move. Snowdrifts look like figures. The edge between what you're seeing and what you're imagining gets thin enough that you stop being sure which side you're on. I'm going to talk about 3 things that happened during my first winter in Canvik. I'm not going to try to explain them. I'm just going to tell you what happened. About 6 weeks into my posting, it was the middle of November. I got a call on the radio from Brenda Kowalski. Brenda runs the general store, a stocky Polish woman in her 50s who had moved up here with her husband 20 years ago and stayed after he had died. She's the kind of person that doesn't rattle easily, which is why the tension in her voice caught my attention. She said there was a man standing outside her shop that she didn't recognize. In a city, that means nothing. In Canvik, it's an event. Everybody knows everyone. Visitors come through occasionally, researchers or pipeline contractors passing through on their way somewhere else. But they almost always check in at the store or the fuel depot first. This man was just standing on the road about 15 feet from the store entrance, facing the building, and he had been there for roughly 20 minutes. Brenda said that he wasn't dressed for the weather. A canvas work jacket, regular pants, no hat, no gloves. The temperature outside was around 30 below. I drove over. It took me about 4 minutes. When I pulled up, my headlights hit him and he was still there, standing in the same spot that Brenda had described. I left the engine running and the lights on and got out. He was average height, maybe 5'10", late 40s or early 50s, thinning brown hair, clean-shaven. His skin was that deep wind-burned red you get after real exposure. But he wasn't shivering. He wasn't hunched. Wasn't doing any of the things that a human body does when it's 30 below and you're standing outside in a canvas jacket. I identified myself, told him that I was the local officer. I asked if he was all right. He turned to look at me. His eyes were focused, clear. Not the glazed over look that you get with hypothermia, not the 1,000-yard stare of somebody in shock. He looked at me the way you would look at someone who had just walked into a waiting room. Patient, a little curious. I asked him his name. "Carl," he said. I asked for a last name. He thought about it for a moment, the way you think about a question that doesn't quite apply to your situation. And then he said, "I don't think that matters." I asked where he came from. He pointed north. Not along the road, straight north toward the coast, and toward the frozen ocean that stretched out beyond into nothing. "From out there," he said. His voice was calm, conversational, like we were chatting about the weather, which in a way I guess we were, because the weather should have killed him. I looked down at his boots. Old leather work boots, the kind you would see at a vintage shop or a 70-year-old farmer's closet. They were dry, completely dry. You can't walk 10 feet in Canvik in November without your boots getting covered in snow, and this man had supposedly walked in from the direction of the open tundra and the ice shelf, and his boots looked like he had just taken them out of a box. I brought him inside the store. Brenda poured him a coffee without being asked, the way she does for anyone who's come through the door. Carl took the mug and wrapped both hands around it and held it against his chest. I watched him for a while. He didn't drink from it, just held it the way a person might hold something they recognized from a long time ago, turning it over in their memory. And Brenda stood behind the counter pretending to sort inventory, but I could see her watching us in the reflection of the window glass. I sat down across from Carl at the small table Brenda keeps near the front of the store, and I tried to get more information. He answered my questions, but there was a quality to the conversation that I've struggled to describe since. It wasn't that he was being evasive. It was more like my questions were slightly off target, like I was asking about things that didn't quite connect to whatever his actual situation was. He said that he had been walking for a while. He couldn't name the month. He didn't know who the president was. When I asked where he was trying to get to, he just looked at the wall for a few seconds and said, "Oh, I think I was just passing through." I tried coming at it from different angles. I asked if he had family somewhere. He said that he thought he did once, but he said it in the way that you would talk about a dream that you had years ago that left an impression but no details. I asked if he had come from one of the other villages up the coast. He shook his head slowly and said, "Oh, no farther than that." I asked how far. He looked at me and there was something in his expression that I still think about. Not confusion, not sadness exactly. Something closer to patience. The patience of a person who's been traveling for so long that the question of where they started doesn't have a simple answer anymore. "I don't remember," he said. "It's been a long time." His voice was calm through all of it, even, measured. No tremor, no agitation. He could have been talking about a trip to the hardware store. I want to be clear about something. I've dealt with disoriented people, hypothermia cases, people in mental health crisis, drunks who don't know what day it is. Carl wasn't any of those. He was lucid. His sentences were coherent. He made eye contact. He just existed in some kind of parallel context where the basic facts that I was trying to establish didn't have any footing. And the thing I kept coming back to was that he was physically fine. His skin was cold when I touched his hand during a cursory check, but not dangerously cold. No sign of frostbite on his fingers, ears, or nose. His color was off from the windburn, but his circulation was fine. He should have been dead. A person standing outside for 20 minutes in those temperatures and that clothing isn't going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be in serious medical danger. Carl was just a guy holding a coffee mug. I arranged for him to spend the night at the clinic. Louise, the nurse practitioner on rotation that month, checked him over and came back looking confused. Healthy vitals, no signs of cold exposure, no signs of anything really. She said he was in perfectly normal health for a man his age, which didn't make sense, and we both knew that it didn't make sense. But there wasn't a medical form for man who should be dead but isn't. I walked Carl to the clinic bed myself. He laid down on it without complaint, pulled the blanket up and closed his eyes. I stepped out, locked the deadbolt from the outside, and I went home. In the morning, Louise radioed me. The cot was empty. I went over immediately. The deadbolt was still locked. I had to unlock it to get inside. And the window in that room was maybe 10 inches wide, a narrow horizontal slot near the ceiling meant for ventilation in summer. A child couldn't have fit through it. The blanket on the cot was folded neatly at the foot, the way that you would leave it in a hotel. We searched the clinics. 1 story, 4 rooms, nothing. We went outside and checked for tracks. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, maybe 2 inches, and the ground around the clinic was smooth. No footprints, not one. Not coming in, not going out. I filed a report with the troopers describing an unidentified male, probable psychological distress, unknown current whereabouts. They said they would keep an eye out, but nothing ever came of it. No missing persons report anywhere in the state matched Carl's description. He just appeared and then he didn't. I asked around town over the following days. Most people just shrugged. An old woman named Ruth, one of the elders who lived in Canvik her entire life, listened to my description and then sat quiet for a long time. Eventually, she said something that I didn't understand, so I asked her to translate. She looked at me and said, "He wasn't here for you." And then she stood up and walked back to her house. About 3 weeks later, it was early December. It was a full polar night. I was on a late patrol run along the coast road, which in Canvik is really just a packed snow track that follows the shoreline for a few miles before it peters out into nothing. I drove this way a couple of times a week, partly as a security check on the fish camps and storage sheds scattered along the coast, partly because sitting in my cabin during the endless dark was going to break me faster than the cold would. And the darkness out there isn't like anything you've experienced if you've only lived in places where light pollution exists. It's not just an absence of light. It is weight, substance to it. And the headlights on my truck carved out this narrow corridor in the black, and beyond the edges of that corridor, the world stopped. Stars overhead when it was clear, the aurora sometimes, painting the sky in those slow-moving greens. But the land itself was just erased. You could drive off the edge of the earth out here and not know it until you hit whatever was at the bottom. About 3 miles out on the coast road, I stopped the truck. I had heard something, or thought that I had, over the sound of the engine. I killed the ignition and I rolled down the window. The sea ice makes noise. Anybody who's spent time on the northern coast knows this. It groans, it cracks. It makes these long, slow sounds like a ship hull settling. You get used to it the same way you get used to a house creaking. But what I was hearing wasn't that. It was rhythmic. A low, resonant tone that pulsed in a slow, steady beat. Maybe one pulse every 4 or 5 seconds. Not mechanical. There was an organic quality to it. Like something enormous breathing far away, or a heartbeat echoing up through the ground from somewhere deep. It was coming from the direction of the frozen ocean. I got out of my truck. The cold hit me immediately. That knife-edge Arctic cold that finds every gap in your clothing and turns your exposed skin into a warning system. I walked to the edge of the shore ice where the gravel beach met the sea ice shelf. The sound was clearer here, and I could feel it, not just hear it. A vibration that came up through the ground and into my boots and settled into my ribcage, low and steady and patient. It wasn't loud, that's the thing. If I had the truck engine running, I might not have heard it at all. But in the silence of the Arctic night, with nothing else competing for attention, it filled everything. It was in the air and in the ground and in my chest, and it was the only sound in the world. I took a few steps out onto the ice shelf. The surface was rough under my boots, rigid and uneven where the freeze had buckled and resettled. I stopped about 20 feet from the shore. The sound was maybe slightly louder here, or maybe I was imagining that. It's hard to be objective about something that you're standing inside of. I want to describe what it felt like to stand there, because the sound itself is only part of it. I was alone, no backup for 90 minutes by air, and that's assuming that I could even reach somebody on the radio from that spot, which wasn't guaranteed. It was dark in every direction except the small cone of light from my truck headlights behind me. And even that was getting hard to see as I moved further out. And the temperature was somewhere around 35 below. and the sound was pulsing up out of the ice beneath my feet, steady as a resting heartbeat, and I couldn't identify it. And that's what kept me there. My training was clear. There was nothing on the ice, and that was my responsibility. And being out there alone in those conditions was exactly the kind of decision that turns into a body recovery operation. I knew that I should get back in the truck, but my brain kept reaching for an explanation, kept trying to file the sound into some category that it recognized. And every time that it failed, it tried again. Like when you have a word on the tip of your tongue and you can't stop reaching for it. I stood there for about 15 minutes. The sound didn't change. Same tempo, same depth, same vibration in my chest. And then it stopped. Not a fade, not a gradual winding down. It just ended mid-pulse, like somebody threw a switch. One moment it was there, filling the air and the ground in my body, and the next moment there was nothing. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like pressure, like the air had been pulled tight. I waited. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and nothing. Just the ordinary sounds of the ice doing its ordinary thing. The distant groans and pops that I had already learned to tune out. I walked back to the truck. I drove back to town. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the next week, I asked around about it. I kept things casual. I asked the fishermen if the ice made strange sounds this time of year. A couple of them said sure, the ice is always noisy, you learn to ignore it. But when I got more specific, when I described what I heard, the rhythm, the depth, the way that it settled into your chest, the answers seemed to change. People got quieter, not scared exactly, more like the quiet you get when somebody brings up a topic that everybody silently agreed not to talk about. Pete Halverson was the one who finally talked to me about it. Pete's a Norwegian, been in Kamvik almost 30 years. Came up for a fishing season and he never left. He's built like a barrel and speaks in this measured, deliberate way. Like every sentence is a load-bearing wall and he's making sure it's plumb before he moves on. We were in the store drinking coffee at Brenda's table. The same table where Carl had sat a few weeks earlier, though I tried not to think about that. Pete told me that some winters you hear it and some winters you don't. Said there's no predicting it. Some years the ice is quiet all season. Other years it starts up in November and comes and goes until the breakup in the spring. But the winters when it shows up tend to be the winters when things go wrong. I asked him what he meant by wrong. He looked at me for a while, the way people up here do before they say something that they don't particularly want to say. And then he took a drink of his coffee and set it down and told me about the winter before Walt Dreyer had left. I pushed him on it. He was reluctant to tell. He swirled his coffee around in his mug for a while and looked out the window at the dark. The winter before Walt left, Pete said, they heard the sound for about 2 weeks running. Off and on, mostly at night, sometimes during the twilight hours. And that winter, 3 people from the village went out on the ice and didn't come back right. 2 of them were eventually found, dead, exposure. But their bodies were a long way from where they should have been. Much farther out on the ice than made any kind of sense, and given when they had left and how long they'd be gone. Pete said that one of them, a younger guy who had gone out to check his crab pots, was found almost 12 miles from shore. He had been gone less than 6 hours. Even on a snowmobile, 12 miles out and the distance back would have been a stretch. But the guy was on foot. His snowmobile was still parked at the shore where he had left it. His tracks went straight out, Pete said, like he wasn't wandering. Like he knew exactly where he was going. A straight line due north for 12 miles. I asked what was 12 miles out, what he had been walking toward. Pete shook his head. Nothing. It's all open ice. There's nothing out there for 100 miles. The third person was never found at all. A woman in her 70s who had lived in Canvik her whole life. Went out one morning to check on her fish traps near the shore and just didn't come home. They found her parka draped over a post near the beach. She had taken it off and left it there, in the cold, in the dark. Yeah, she knew the ice better than anybody in this town, Pete said. 60 years living on this coast. She wouldn't have gone out there without a reason. But there wasn't a reason. And Pete looked at me for a long moment after he had finished talking, and then he said, "When you hear it, you stay off the ice. That's all I know to tell you." I heard the sound 2 more times that winter. Both times I was in my cabin, in bed, and it came in faint through the walls. A slow pulse, barely there, like a heartbeat heard through a stethoscope held to the ground. Both times it lasted about an hour. Both times I lay there in the dark and listened and didn't move. I didn't go outside, not those nights. I just lay there and let it pass through me, that low, steady hum, and I waited for it to stop. And both times, eventually, it did. It was late January. The sun had started to show itself again, just barely. A few minutes of orange light on the southern horizon around noon before it sank back down. You wouldn't think that a few minutes of sunlight would mean much, but after weeks of nothing, it was like somebody had cracked a door in a dark room. Everything in town felt slightly lighter, slightly less compressed. People talked more, they moved a little faster. The tribal council asked me to check on Howard Fell. Howard was a white guy in his 60s who lived alone in a cabin about 7 miles north of town, up on a ridge that overlooked the coast. He had been up there for over a decade. Nobody seemed to know much about his life before Canvik. He came into town every couple of weeks for supplies, exchanged the minimum number of words required to complete his transactions, and he went back to his ridge. But it had been almost a month since anybody had seen him, and even by Howard's standards, that was a long time. I took the snowmobile up on a day when the twilight was decent, about 2 hours of that dim gray light that passes for daytime in late January. The trail up to Howard's place was unbroken snow. Nobody had come down it in a while and nobody had gone up. The snowmobile whined and bucked through the drifts, and by the time that I crested the ridge and saw the cabin, my hands were stiff inside my gloves and my face felt like it had been sandblasted. The cabin was small, well built though. Log walls, a solid roof, a wood stove chimney poking up from the center. No smoke coming from the chimney. In January up here, that meant either the stove was out or nobody was home to feed it. Neither option was good. I parked the snowmobile and walked up to the door. I knocked, announced myself. Nothing. I knocked again, louder, still nothing. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and I went in. The cabin was cold, not outside cold, but well below freezing. The wood stove was dead, and when I opened it and touched the ash, it was ice cold. It hadn't been lit in a long time. Days at least, probably longer than that. The interior was tidy. One main room, a small loft for sleeping, accessible by a ladder, an outhouse around back. The bed in the loft was made. The dishes in the main room were washed and stacked neatly on a shelf. Canned goods were lined up along one wall, a decent supply too. A fuel containers for the stove and for his snowmobile mostly full. A bookshelf in the corner held maybe 30 books, and mostly paperbacks, their spines cracked from rereading. A pair of reading glasses sat atop one of them. Everything in the cabin was where it belonged. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no sign of anything sudden or violent. The place had the feeling of a room that somebody had stepped out of 5 minutes ago and would be coming right back to. Except for the cold. The deep, settled cold of a building that hadn't been heated for a while. And the silence. Not the ordinary silence of an empty cabin, but the kind that sits in a place after the person who lived there is gone for good. Whatever had happened, Howard hadn't left because he ran out of anything. Howard was not here. I searched the whole cabin, which didn't take long. I checked the loft, checked under the bed in the main room, and checked the outhouse. Empty. And then I came back inside and stood in the main room and looked around more carefully. His winter gear was hanging on pegs by the door. His parka, his insulated overalls, his heavy boots, his hat, gloves, and neck gaiter. All of it hung up neatly, the way that you would put it away after coming inside. His snowmobile was parked outside under a tarp. Wherever Howard had gone, he had walked out without any of the things you would need to stay alive outdoors in January in Alaska. Here's the part that has settled into me and hasn't left. On the small wooden table in the center of the room, where Howard apparently ate his meals, there was a mug of coffee. The coffee was frozen solid, which wasn't surprising given how cold the cabin was. A chair was pulled out from the table at a slight angle, the way a chair sits when somebody's just pushed back from a meal and stood up. I stood there and looked at the scene, the coffee, the chair, and I could see it. Howard was sitting there drinking his morning coffee, and at some point, for some reason, he set the mug down, pushed back from the table, stood up and walked to the door and opened it and stepped outside. Without putting on his coat, without putting on his boots. In January, in the Arctic, in the dark. Not in a rush. The chair wasn't knocked over, the mug hadn't spilled. There was no sign of distress anywhere in the cabin. He just stood up and laughed, like something had occurred to him, like he had remembered an errand. I went outside and circled the cabin looking for tracks. The snowfall had been steady enough that anything older than a few days would have been filled in, and the ground around the cabin was smooth. I widened the circle, checked the tree line, such as it was, the stunted spruce that managed to survive up on the ridge. I checked the slope down toward the coast, and nothing. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign that anybody had walked away from the cabin in any direction. I radioed it in and spent another hour searching the immediate area before the twilight faded and I had to rely on my flashlight. No sign of Howard Fell. Over the following week, a search was organized. State troopers sent a 2-person team up and a dozen volunteers from the village helped cover ground. They searched a wide radius around the cabin, the trails down to town, the coastline. Dogs were brought in. The handler was a woman named Peggy from Barrow who had done search and rescue for 15 years, and she told me afterward that the dogs wouldn't pick up a trail. Not that they had picked one up and lost it, and they wouldn't even start. They circled the cabin and just looked at her confused, the way that dogs look when you ask them to do something and there's nothing to do, as if Howard hadn't walked away. As if he had just stopped being there. The search was called off after 10 days. Howard Fell was listed as missing, presumed dead from exposure. The conclusion was reasonable on paper. A man walks outside without gear in the middle of winter. He's gonna be dead within an hour, maybe less. The body would turn up in the spring when the snow melted, everybody figured. But here's what stayed with me. About 4 days into the search, I went back to the cabin on my own. I wanted to look around one more time with fresh eyes. Everything was the same, undisturbed since my initial visit. The coffee, the chair, the gear on the pegs. I didn't find anything new inside. But when I stepped out onto the porch and I looked north, Down the ridge toward the frozen coast, I saw something in the snow. Far away, maybe a quarter-mile down the slope, out where the terrain opens up into that wide white emptiness before it reaches the shore ice. A dark figure standing still, facing away from me, facing north toward the ocean. My first thought was that it had to be Howard. My second thought was that if Howard had been standing out there without winter gear for the past 4 days, well, then he was long dead. My third thought was that the figure was too still. Not the stillness of a person standing in the cold, a different kind of still. The kind of still that makes you realize how much movement a living person makes, even when you think that they're motionless. The slight shifts, the breathing, the small adjustments. This figure had none of that. It was just there, dark against the white, like a hole in the snow. I shouted. My voice cracked in the cold air and carried out across the snow and came back as nothing. No response. The figure didn't move. I started walking toward it. The snow was deep, past my knees in places, and every step was work. I kept my eyes on the figure as much as I could, but when you're struggling through drifts, you have to watch your footing. And every time I looked down and then looked back up, the figure seemed like it might have shifted slightly, or maybe it hadn't. The twilight was low and gray and it played tricks with depth and distance. And after about 100 yards, I stopped to catch my breath. I looked up, and the figure was gone. I scanned the slope. The snow in every direction was unbroken. No tracks, no movement. Just white fading into gray, fading into the dark sky above the coast. I stood there breathing hard, steam pouring from my mouth, and I tried to convince myself that it had been a trick of the light. Low-angle twilight does things to your perception up here. Shadows can look solid. A dark patch of exposed rock can look like a person if you're already keyed up and looking for something. I almost had myself convinced. And then, standing there alone on that slope, I heard it. That sound. That pulsing from the ice, rising up faint but clear from the direction of the frozen coast below me. And that familiar low tone settling into my chest the way that it had before. Slow and patient and completely indifferent to the fact that I was listening. It went on for about 30 seconds and then it stopped. The same sharp cutoff mid-pulse like a door closing. I stood there for a while after it stopped. I don't know how long. The cold was working on me and I knew that I needed to move. So eventually I turned around and walked back up to the cabin. I got on my snowmobile and I drove back to town. I didn't go back to that ridge. By February, the sun was returning. A few more minutes each day, that thin line of orange creeping higher above the southern horizon. I had never been a person who had paid attention to the sunrise before I came to Canvik. Now I would stand at my cabin window during the twilight hours and watch that band of color like it was the most important thing in the world. It was a lifeline, proof that the darkness wasn't permanent, even when every other part of my brain had started to doubt it. I talked to Ruth again, the elder who had brushed me off after the Carl incident. I found her in the tribal council building, sitting by the wood stove with a cup of tea, and I sat down across from her and didn't say anything for a while. She looked at me over her cup and I think that she could see it. The winter, the weight of it. Not just the cold and the dark, but everything else. Everything that I had been through. This time she was more willing to speak. She didn't give me a neat package. There was no big explanation, no mythology laid out in order. She spoke the way you would speak about something that you've lived with your whole life. Something so woven into the fabric of your daily existence that pulling it out for examination feels slightly absurd. Like explaining gravity to someone who's asking why things fall. She said the land up here is old. Not old the way that other places are old. Old in a different way, a deeper way. The kind of old where time doesn't really mean the same thing. She said there are things in the ice and in the dark water underneath the ice that had been there since before people came to this coast, and those things don't think the way that people think. They aren't hostile, they aren't friendly, they don't have intentions, at least not in any way that we would recognize. They just exist, the same way that a deep ocean current exists, or the cold itself exists. You don't fight a current. You learn where it flows and you stay out of its path. I asked her about Carl. She said that some people get pulled in, not grabbed, not taken. Pulled the way a current pulls, where you don't realize what's happening until you're too far out to get back. She said that it happens slowly usually. Somebody starts looking north more than they used to. They take walks that get a little longer each time. They get quiet. And one day they go out and they don't come back. She said Howard was probably one of those. She said you could see it in him the last few times that he came to town. The distance in his eyes, like he was already halfway somewhere else. I asked about Carl specifically if he had been pulled in too, and she thought about it. Oh, he was something different, she said. Like something that got pulled in a long time ago and washed back up for a while. Like driftwood. I asked her what the sound in the ice is. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. And then she said it's the ice remembering. I waited for her to say more, but she didn't. She finished her tea and put the cup down and looked at me, and I understood that she had told me what she was going to tell me and that the rest was mine to sit with. I didn't try to build a theory out of any of it. I'm a cop. My job is to respond to situations, help people, and keep things in order. I'm not a researcher or an investigator looking to solve a mystery. And the truth is, what happened that winter didn't feel like a mystery. Mysteries have answers that you just haven't found yet. This felt more like the world had showed me an edge, a place where the things I understood stopped working, and beyond that edge there was something that I wasn't going to understand no matter how long I looked at it. What I did start to understand was why the people of Canvik live the way they do, why they respect certain boundaries without talking about them, why they don't go out on the ice when the sound comes, and why they don't ask too many questions about the things that happen in the dark months. It isn't superstition. It's the same practical wisdom as knowing not to walk on thin ice or not to turn your back on the ocean. You learn what the dangers are and you build your life around them. I thought about Walt Dreyer a lot during those weeks. The officer before me, the one who left on medical leave halfway through his contract. I had always assumed it was the isolation that got to him. The darkness, the loneliness, the grinding monotony of a one-man post in the middle of nowhere. Now I wondered if Walt had heard the sound, if he had seen something on the ice that he couldn't file away, if he had lain in his cabin at night, the same cabin that I was in right now, and felt that pulse come up through the floor and settle into his bones, and decided that leaving was the only thing that he could do. I don't blame him, but I also understood in a way that I couldn't have understood before that winter why I wasn't leaving. It's hard to explain without sounding like I had lost my mind, and maybe I had a little. But there's something about knowing the shape of a danger that makes you want to stay close to it. Not out of bravery, out of the sense that walking away won't make it any less real. It'll just mean you're somewhere else, carrying the knowledge of it, without the people around you who understand what you're carrying. The people of Canvik understood. They had been living alongside whatever this was for generations. They didn't run from it and they didn't study it. They just knew that it was there the way you know the ocean is there when you live on the coast, and they structured their lives accordingly. There was something grounding about that, Something that made more sense to me than driving south and pretending the world only contained the things that I could explain. I called my ex-wife one night in late February, just to hear a voice from the world that I used to live in. It was afternoon in Anchorage and she sounded busy, but she talked to me for a few minutes. She asked how I was doing and I said that I was fine. She asked what it was like up there and I said quiet. I didn't tell her any of it, not because she wouldn't listen. Lisa's a good listener, always was. But standing in my cold cabin with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the sounds of traffic and normalcy in the background of her voice, I realized the words didn't work. What I had gone through, the experiences don't translate. It's not a story you can tell, not really. You have to stand at the edge of the ice in the dark and feel the pulse come up through the ground and into your body to understand why a man might walk out of his cabin without a coat and not come back. Not because something dragged him, not because he was out of his mind, but because something called, and in that moment, the call made more sense than staying. I told Lisa that I would talk to her soon, and I hung up and sat there in the quiet and listened to the wind push snow against the walls of my cabin. The spring came, slowly and grudgingly, the way it does up here. The sun climbed higher, the days got longer, and by late March we had real daylight again, hours of it, and the snow started to soften on south-facing slopes. Canvik thawed back into something that almost felt normal, and people came out of their houses more. Kids played in the muddy streets between the snowdrifts. The fishermen started hauling their equipment out of storage and going over their boats, and you could hear their voices carrying across town, louder and more frequent than they had been all winter. Brenda put a handwritten sign in the store window advertising a sale on canned goods, which was her way of celebrating. I found myself thawing too, not just physically. The tightness in my chest that I had been carrying since December started to ease. Sleep got easier. The days had structure again, marked by actual sunrise and sunset, instead of one unbroken stretch of dark punctuated by brief intervals of gray. I started going on longer patrols, not because I needed to, but because being outside during the day, actual daytime with a real sun in the sky, was something that I couldn't get enough of. Like drinking water after you've been thirsty for months. I let myself believe that the worst was behind me. In late April, the sea ice started breaking up. This is a noisy, dramatic process. Huge sections of ice that had been locked together all winter start cracking apart and drifting. The sound of it carries for miles. Those deep booms and groans as millions of tons of frozen ice tear themselves into pieces. The fishermen start getting their boats ready. There's an energy in town and anticipation. Open water means fishing season. It means income. It means life gets easier. A fishing crew was out in a boat about a mile offshore scouting the ice conditions when they found something on a large float. They radioed me. I went out with them. It was a bright day, the sky that sharp Arctic blue that hurts your eyes after a winter of darkness. The water between the floes was dark and calm, and we motored out to what they had spotted and pulled up alongside it. On the ice, placed neatly side by side, was a pair of old leather work boots. They were facing north, dry and in good condition, the same kind that Carl had been wearing. And nothing else was there. No clothing, no equipment, no sign of anything except the boots, arranged carefully as if somebody had stopped walking and taken them off, set them down, and kept going barefoot. Onto the breaking ice, heading north toward the open water, toward the Arctic Ocean that stretched out vast and dark and endless beyond the ice edge. I stared at those boots for a long time. The crew watched me, and I could tell by their faces that they understood what they were looking at, or at least understood enough of it. Nobody said anything, and the only sounds were the water lapping against the hull and the distant groaning of the ice grinding together. One of the fishermen, a younger guy whose name I think was Joseph, started to say something and then stopped. He looked at the boots and then looked north, out toward the open water where the ice was breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. And then he looked back at me and shook his head once, slowly. I picked the boots up. They were lighter than expected. The leather soft, new feeling, even though they looked old. There was no water damage and no salt staining. They could have been placed here 5 minutes ago or 50 years ago. I brought them back to shore. I put them in the closet of my office on the top shelf behind some boxes, and I closed the door. Howard Fell's body never turned up, not in the spring melt and not in the summer. His cabin still sits on the North Ridge. Nobody's moved into it. Nobody goes up there much. I signed on for a second year in Canvic. The department was surprised. My lieutenant asked if I was sure, and I said that I was. The money's still good and I've gotten used to the quiet. But if I'm honest, there's something else. This place, it has its hooks in me and I can't tell if it's my choice or something else entirely. I think about that sometimes, usually late at night when the cabin is dark and the town is silent. I think about Howard and what happened, whatever it was that made him set the mug down and stand up and walk out the door. I wonder if it was sudden, or if it started small, a pull so faint you would mistake it for your own restlessness, your own curiosity, and by the time you recognized it for what it was, you were already walking. I wonder about the woman that Pete told me about, the elder who had lived her whole life on this coast and knew the ice better than anyone. How she had draped her parka over a post like she wouldn't be needing it anymore and just walked out. After 60 years, I wonder what she heard or what she saw, or what finally tipped her over from staying to going. I wonder about Carl, where he came from, how long he had been out there, whether he's still walking. Some nights when I can't sleep, I open the closet in my office and I look at those boots on the top shelf. They haven't changed, still dry, still soft. And they don't look like something that spent a winter on a sheet of ice in the Arctic Ocean. They look like somebody just set them down, like someone's coming back for them. I close the closet and I go back to bed. I still hear the sound sometimes on quiet nights when the wind dies and the town goes still. That low, steady pulse rising up faint through the floor of my cabin. When it comes, I close my eyes and stay very still and wait for it to pass. So far, it always passes. So far.